Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome into the National Signing Day special on SicEm365.com, 365 Sports. Craig Smoak with you on this Wednesday morning, December the 21st, 2022. National Signing Day number one, already off to a fast and furious start. Lots of national letters of intent coming in all across the country. And yes, some flips and surprises and moves already occurring over the last few hours. One in particular that we will talk about here in just a couple of minutes. And still a bunch more surprises, I'm sure, to come throughout the rest of this morning and the rest of today. But we're going to be talking about Baylor's 2023 signing class. It's been a long road, a long build to get to today. 21 was going to be 22, but now 21 recruits expected to sign today, and a bunch of them have already come in. Over a handful already have come in, and we'll get to that, and we'll get to why it's 21 and not 22 in just a second after this introduction. But got Jacob Wilson behind the scenes producing. Want to give a shout out to him and appreciate his time and effort in being here this morning. And I'm joined, of course, by my Bearcast partner in crime. And, well, Grayson, it's been an eventful 2023 class build up and all of that, and here we are, and obviously it's been even more interesting the last few hours. But first things first, how are we doing this morning?
Yeah, I mean, this morning was supposed to be a really exciting time, and obviously last night I think kind of threw a damper on that to a certain extent, but it still is an exciting time. Lots of really good commits that we're going to be talking about and their opportunity to sign with Baylor. Of course, we're also probably going to see a couple transfers that may sign as well. We'll see kind of how that works. That's kind of hit or miss a little bit. I remember, I guess 2 years ago, Drew Estrada, for instance, his NLI came in, as we were doing the show. So we'll see if Keytron Jackson and Campbell Barrington, if they're able to sign during our time period, but I'm sure we'll talk about them as well. But in general, exciting time, really good class. I've been covering it from day one, so I'm excited to talk about all these guys and kind of their impact on Baylor and kind of how we got here, with kind of each of them and maybe a little bit of backstory. And of course, we'll hear from a couple Baylor signees as well a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, we'll be with you for a couple of hours. We're going to touch on every signee that comes in as they are announced and kind of stick with just the way that they come in order and check them off as they go. And we will have a couple of interviews. Isaiah Robinson and Matthew Klopfenstein. We'll hear from both of those young men and also take some of your thoughts on Twitter and get your feedback on how you're feeling about the Baylor recruiting class. And depending on what kind of news trickles in across the country, if there's a big-time name or something like that, we'll pass that along as well, because we do have plenty of time to go here this morning. But let's get right into it. There are some names that have already signed, but one name that's not going to be signing this morning, as it started to really sort of become a hot rumor. I guess a couple of days ago, there were sort of and maybe even earlier, there was some beginnings to some rumors about Baylor blue chip quarterback commit Austin Novosad, and a young man who's an Elite 11 guy, a young man who's been committed for about a year at this point, a young man who had flirtations and dances with Texas A&M and stuck with Baylor, and with Ohio State and stuck with Baylor. And all of a sudden here over the last few days, there was some talk because Oregon lost a quarterback commit that they had for, a while, that, well, now they need a quarterback recruit. Where could they possibly look? And, people started thinking about it a little bit, and all of a sudden I recall, I think it was Smokey said the other day, like, oh, wonder if they start calling Austin Novosad or, and I think that kind of, given that he's a high-profile guy, given that he's shown that he'll listen to other offers, and given that he had a previous relationship with new Oregon OC Will Stein, there was some reasoning to start to kind of think, okay, well, that's something to keep an eye on. And then that sort of built up a little bit more until we reached a point yesterday where there started to be some serious heat and momentum in that direction, Grayson. And last night, you put a post out on the SicEm 365 premium section, and I think, started to catch fire, bit word on Twitter as well, that Austin Novosad was, in fact, leaning towards flipping to Oregon and was, in fact, going to flip to Oregon this morning. And I don't know, less than an hour ago, sure enough, the graphic comes out. Skodux, Austin Novosad has flipped to Oregon after a year committed as a Bear, after Ohio State and A&M and many others came at him. He is actually headed to Eugene after all that. So let's start there. That's the big story. I know I've already seen J.J. Joe, Baylor Legends, put a spin, spin sounds negative, but he's put a positive on it, and I somewhat agree with him, and I'll get to why in a few minutes. But let's just get to what happened here, man. How did Baylor go from having an Elite 11 quarterback under wraps for an entire year and fending off, multiple schools to the day before signing day, the day before he's finally going to sign, he flips. What's going on here?
So I think it's important that we go back to the summer, right? When he was talking to Ohio State, A&M, even Notre Dame, there was some flirtation there, took a visit to all of those places. The only place they took an official visit to, though, was Ohio State. And, during that time period, Baylor's working with a Big 12 championship, a Sugar Bowl, and they're kind of, they have a lot of momentum as a program. And I think Austin saw that momentum, great relationship, of course, with Sean Bell. And that really carried them through that period, even though there were some really, really good schools, some really enticing offers that were coming at him. And then from that point on, it felt like he's going to sign with Baylor, right? That Baylor had kind of moved past the biggest obstacle in his recruitment. But then things, kind of went south a little bit, and it all started, I would say, I don't want to say it started here, but I think on Monday of last week, Oregon had an in-home visit with Austin Novosad, and this wasn't something that was reported really by anyone because it really wasn't supposed to be, but he had an in-home visit with them. Will Stein, the offense coordinator who was at UTSA, was at Lake Travis previously, has a great relationship with Austin. He got the job at Oregon. They started talking pretty much immediately. They had the in-home visit on Monday. Then TCU had an in-home visit on Wednesday. And so you're thinking, okay, so there's two schools kind of involved, even though it really seemed like Oregon was the bigger threat throughout this process here. And then on Friday, Dave Aranda had an in-home visit with Austin Novosad. And by all accounts, that visit went really well. Things were trending in Baylor's direction again, that he was just going to sign, and it felt like everything, was kind of calm and all was good. Then Saturday rolled around, and Austin ended up taking a surprise visit to Oregon. And he went to Oregon, went to Eugene, had a visit there, got to know their staff better, got to see the campus, everything like that. And from that moment on, there was a little bit of momentum that started to turn in Oregon's direction. And then, of course, yesterday, things really started to take a turn all the way in Oregon's direction. And so, I think there's a lot of routes that we could go about talking about this, but I think in general, some of the things that I think kind of maybe stand out to me are the fact that, Oregon had a solid year and Baylor did not have a good year comparatively to what they had the year before. So I think maybe that was a part of it. I think that Will Stein, being a really good offensive mind, a guy that proved it at UTSA, I think there's a belief there that Austin's going to get an opportunity to, lead a high-powered offense immediately after Bo Nix leaves, because he will redshirt this year, most likely, since Bo Nix is coming back. At least that's my belief on it. And so I think that had something to do with it. I think Oregon, the brand, had a lot to do with it for a variety of reasons. Of course, if you want to talk about NIL, that's part of it, but the Oregon brand in general, it's a national brand and something that I think was also very appealing to Austin. So if you put all those things together, it led him to have a really good trip, for that one day up in Oregon. And I guess it was enough to flip him, which is kind of baffling to me. Because of the simple fact that Baylor put in all this time, all this effort, pretty much made him the priority from the moment they offered him. And then you got Oregon, which is basically, you're kind of, people even reported their 1B option was Austin Novosad because Dante Moore was committed to them. But I think in general, once Will Stein got to Oregon, they pretty much knew Dante Moore was going to flip, and that's why they ended up having such they immediately kind of transitioned towards recruiting Austin. So a lot to talk about. I don't know where you want to go with this after that, but that's pretty much the story. That's how it ended up unfolding, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, and it seems like that was, several weeks. That was jam-packed into a few days. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about Dante Moore's decommitment, and that happened like yesterday or the day before, and it feels like it happened about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they were recruiting him before Dante. They knew because Dante took an official visit to UCLA. Like, they knew that something probably was coming.
Yeah, it had to have. And, kudos to Oregon for swooping in and getting a big fish there at the end. I mean, that must be nice to lose Dante Moore, and you're like, in days' time, you go and swipe an Elite 11 quarterback from Texas on the eve of National Signing Day. So that is, without a doubt, the big headline to start off National Signing Day from a Baylor perspective. And the thing about it is, I don't even know if it really is from an Oregon perspective. It seems like it's a big deal, but it's certainly not as important and as big of a deal as it is a loss for Baylor, it feels like. Definitely. You know what I mean? Like, it's not as big of a win for them as it is a loss for Baylor. So,
especially if you were of the belief that Austin was going to come in and potentially be the starter at Baylor. Because
I was never under that impression.
Right.
But there were people that probably thought that,
Yeah, and I think people thought he could come in and compete, which I kind of thought he would, but I felt like it was probably going to be Blake Shapen's job. I think most people thought that, at least initially, it would be Blake's job once again next season. Whereas at Oregon, he's not starting over Bo Nix, and I think Oregon fans know that and are happy with that. So yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it's a huge loss for Baylor. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat it at all, because the simple fact is they didn't take a 2022 quarterback to take Austin Novosad. So they've missed out on 2 straight cycles now of taking a high school quarterback commit. Now, could they take one at the end here? Sure, but it's like, who's available? There's just not a lot of names available. And so I guess it's probably important that we kind of transition this talk into what's next at that position really quick. They're going to take a transfer. That's happening now. I don't see any way you can't. Like, you have to have another scholarship quarterback who has actually played football games, or at least been in a college system for a while. And then that second option is you take another transfer, maybe a young transfer, a guy who's just on a depth chart, buried on a depth chart somewhere. Or you try to take a late, bloomer 2023 quarterback that maybe you find interesting or intriguing, and you try to develop them. But they got to find a backup quarterback now, and they're going to have to do that, I think, through the portal.
Yeah, and if you look at the quarterback position for Baylor over the last year, there is way more going out than there is coming in. I mean, you just mentioned it. They did not take a quarterback in the last recruiting class because they were dead set, all in, everything to the middle of the table on Austin Novosad for over a year. And that now leaves them with 0 quarterbacks signed in 2 classes. Now, like you said, they can make up for it and eventually sign a guy here before all is said and done. Today's not the only signing day. There's another one in February. There's the time in between all of that. There's a dead period, though. So that complicates matters. And quite frankly, there's just the thin ranks of the quarterback spot, because everybody's looking for a quarterback, and everybody's gone after the quarterbacks they really loved, and it really is a matter of who's left. Well, Hudson Card's out there. They're not getting Hudson Card. I wouldn't bank on that. I wouldn't hope on that. So who else is out there beyond that? It's, you know what? We've seen a lot of guys already make their decisions, and it's tough sledding. It's tough pickings. And, there will be guys that enter after bowl games. There will be more. So that's probably where you're looking now. But there's, without a doubt, a really empty room right now beyond Blake Shapen that has to be addressed quickly and, in some ways before spring ball, because he can't roll in as the only guy on scholarship. And, Luke Anthony's all out eligibility. Thankfully, they have him just for tomorrow, because tomorrow's the bowl game. So what a few days it's been. And look, there's a bunch of really good players who are becoming officially Baylor Bears right now. And one of them, Matthew Klopfenstein, he signed officially. We'll have an interview with him coming up in a little while. So we're not going to make this all about Austin Novosad, but I mean, when you go all in like they did at quarterback for this young man, all of the interviews, all of the time talked about him, I mean, we got to start off with a National Signing Day Eve flip. So, you've got Luke Anthony as your backup quarterback tomorrow for the Armed Forces Bowl behind Blake Shapen. And if you need a third quarterback, I don't even know what that would look like. I'm not sure who their third quarterback on the depth chart is.
Landry Kinney.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Landry Kinney, which, boy, is that not fitting.
Right, yeah. No kidding.
Related to the previous biggest flip in, Baylor quarterbacking history with his brother GJ, who ended up at Texas rather than Baylor, and that was thought to be a massive loss back in the day, really back in the day at this point. And they managed out to be just fine and dandy in the end of it. And GJ is now, a up and coming coach and all that jazz. But yeah, I do recall, even though I wasn't around during that time period, that was, full drama, and it worked out all right. So maybe this is the same way. But yeah, I mean, just an absolutely brutal blow, especially given just the time invested in all of that.
Right. And I will say, since we kind of have talked about this a little bit, this is a bigger loss for the future of the Baylor program than it is for next season. I think that's kind of where I'm at with this. I know that the expectations were really high that he was going to come in and be the starter immediately for some people. And maybe eventually he did take over the starting job, but I think my thought process is a year from now is where they're going to feel this a lot more than next football season, if that makes sense. So it's a tough loss. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. It's the biggest loss that Baylor, I think, has ever suffered the day before signing day. I can't think of many others outside of, Darrell Arthur's dream where he decided to flip from Baylor to Kansas. That's one that comes to mind. But this is a huge one, and this is a big blow, and now they're going to have to figure out a way to upgrade their depth at the quarterback position, figure out ways to get creative with the depth chart. But it does solve the problem as far as guys being, unhappy with the depth chart, because now, I mean, any transfer is going to be like, oh, I'm at least guaranteed the second string job, and I have an opportunity to compete with Blake Shapen for real next season. So I think that could be appealing to a fairly high level transfer.
Yeah, it will need to be appealing because they're going to have to go get a couple of guys to just even have adequate depth heading into spring ball and much less next season. So that's official. A huge flip for Oregon, landing Austin Novosad on this signing day morning, and the Ducks will roll on, and the Bears will move along as well, and they've already signed, closing in on 7 or 8 guys now at this point. So we'll get to those guys. I just want to read J.J. Joe's tweet because I sent out this is an all-timer of a loss because of just, again, the time invested, the resources that went to this, the amount, of quarterbacks you passed on recruiting to land Novosad. He said, hate to lose him, but with the portal nowadays, no reason to panic. Best case scenario anyway was that Blake grows into a consistent QB1 for the next 2 seasons. Dude would have been in the portal anyway if Blake played good football in 2023. And, Kyron Drones, he did enter the portal. I saw some thought of, well, if, he would have stayed around, maybe if he'd have thought that Novosad, but he was looking for an opportunity. So he was going to be gone regardless. I don't think you were going to we're not signing Novosad. Drones is going to stick around here.
His obstacle was Shapen, not Novosad.
So he wasn't going to stay because they weren't going to pursue Novosad. No. So that idea is out the window. But any thoughts before we move along? And we'll circle back to more of this, but any thoughts on what J.J. Joe said there about the portal these days? No reason to panic. I just think there's a little bit of a reason to panic. Yeah. I think this is large enough to where there's a little bit of a reason to panic right now looking at that quarterback room. And while I do agree that with the NIL era, there is something to guys only waiting a certain amount of time. This isn't like the previous era where you had Bryce Petty sitting on a bench for 3 years until he was 29 years old, basically, waiting to become a starter. But there was no portal back then. There was no NIL back then.
Right.
I saw a comment, I think we were interviewing Bryce Petty several months ago. It was like, would you have done the same thing? Would you have waited your turn at Baylor if it were different? He's like, yeah, I would have done that. Yeah. And I'm sitting there thinking that's a really admirable answer. But that's easy to say when you're not faced with, what that would have looked like.
I mean, he was fine taking the whole, what do you take, the blue shirt or whatever
he was taking
he was fine with, I think, waiting his turn. But Austin's a top 8 quarterback in the country. Kyron Drones was a 4-star quarterback. It's just different. But as far as JJ's tweet goes, I think that the only way that it's okay is if Blake Shapen is literally a top 3 quarterback in the Big 12 next year. Because if he's not, then the following year was going to be another completely open competition, and my expectation would be that Austin's talent would eventually win out. So that's the hard part, right, is projecting that. I do think Blake's a really good quarterback. I do think there were some signs of growth from Blake at times last year. The issues were the mistakes. And I think those are things that can get cleaned up by a young quarterback. So I think he'll be fine. I understand what JJ's saying, but at the end of the day, their depth is really broken and their quarterback recruiting has been just not up to par over the last 2 years. And it's really all just circumstances, right? Because they felt so good about Austin that they decided to take a chance on him. Unfortunately, they were 1 day short, which is, it's just not even a day.
That's all it takes,
12
man.
hours short.
I mean, you can have them for 364 days, but you got to have them for day 365, and that's where they missed him. And so that is what it is. I've seen he's gone on record, and we'll circle back to more of that conversation, and we'd love to hear from you as well if you want to hit us up on Twitter. And I don't think we have the YouTube chat room pulled up. If you want to pull that up, Grayson, and kind of monitor that, you can hit us up on YouTube and give your thoughts on other storylines or other guys who have signed, and we'll get to those as they come along. And just if you see something worthwhile to pass along, then pass it along, and we'll answer that question or comment on that opinion or what have you. But at this point, we will move on to another topic for the time being, and that is the number of guys who have signed. It's still a banner day. Don't let the one move dampen the entire feeling over this class, because there are going to be 20-plus guys who have been committed for varying degrees of time that are going to be walking into the green and gold next season and will be big contributors in a lot of cases, because you look at this year's team and they're losing a lot once again. This is the second year in a row. And I think that's probably what has people the most nervous is you're suffering a loss like we were talking about, and you're coming off of a season like you've had, and there's not a bunch of proven depth coming back necessarily. It's going to be a young team once again. It's going to be an inexperienced team, and on the lines this time around, unlike this past year when you kind of didn't take full advantage of that. You've got a couple of assistant coaches already gone. There's some positive news needed, Grayson, and I've kind of been saying here lately, like, they need some juice, man. They need some juice. They haven't had just that oomph to the program, whether it just be that feeling you get over social media or what you see on the field per se. And so tomorrow I think is going to be huge, this game against Air Force. I don't know how many people really care about this game outside of the Air Force Academy's fan base and Baylor's fan base. So put together, that's not even like Ohio State's all put together, I don't think, or someone along those lines. But, I mean, for both those programs, there is going to be a lot of investment in tomorrow's result. And I think for Baylor, it's a really important game, man, for them to go out and win. I mean, it's not, again, a New Year's Day type of contest or opponent, but this is a team in Air Force that will punch you in the mouth and run all over you and keep the ball away from you. And I'm hoping we see a little something tomorrow, because, I circle back to that just lack of oomph, and feel like we need to see some oomph tomorrow coming off of a day like today where you're wrapping up your recruiting class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just a situation where, you want to see a team go out there and have a lot of fight, to end this season, even though it was a disappointing year, even though you finished really, poorly record-wise, especially towards the back end against teams that, we're at the top level of the conference this past season. But yeah, I think it's just important for the health of the program and momentum, right? Like, everyone I talk to, it's more so just, man, this program has no momentum right now.
That's really
where
what
did it all go?
Indicate, like basically what I'm saying,
right,
too.
Like, where did all the momentum go? And see, the problem is, and I hate this so much, but if this Austin thing didn't happen, we'd be sitting here today talking about Campbell Barrington, who committed to Baylor. We'd be talking about this just monster wide receiver who I don't think anyone realizes how good Keytron Jackson is, but people just aren't going to talk about that, because Austin is the only thing anyone is going to talk about this morning. But Baylor's doing a great job in the transfer portal, and it's only going to get better. I'm anticipating maybe a couple more in the next couple days as well to pop from the transfer portal. So even though we're sitting here talking about this bad news that happened, and something that is bad news, don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you shouldn't be upset about it. You absolutely should be. I mean, I spent hours covering his recruitment, days, a year.
No one should be more upset than you, quite frankly,
right? Like,
other
going
than the
to
coaches.
all of his things and going to all of his events, talking to he and his family. Like, it happens, right? But on the flip side, like, we all have to put this in perspective and understand that there are still good things going on with this Baylor program. I just think they need this big moment. And I think winning a game against Air Force, even though it's only Air Force, it still is positive momentum. Adding more transfer portal prospects, that's momentum. So yeah, I do agree with you. They need to gain even more of that, but I just feel like it's just such a disservice to what they've done so far in the portal that we haven't even really talked about it because of the big news that happened this morning.
Well, I mean, that news trumps everything, so we'll circle back around to that because that's your quarterback that was kind of your crown jewel of the class. But there are, as we mentioned, other guys that are making it official, and let's talk about some of those guys as there are close to 10 now that are official. And yeah, it's a bummer on one hand, but there's a lot of good that's still coming out of today. And that will be around 21, 22-ish guys when all is said and done here this morning. And I don't know, any guys playing in the afternoon? You know how long it's going to stretch out, really? We're not going to stick with it the entire time, but we'll get a bulk of them here in the morning because there's already almost 10 right now.
Hopefully not. I know Trey Wilson and I think Isaiah Robinson's are both. I think Isaiah's is at 9, so his ceremony. But I mean, we can talk about him. That Isaiah's signing.
I'm just saying, is there anybody that's like deep in the afternoon that you're gonna have to wait on?
See, I don't know the answer to that, but some guys, that's the hard part. Is some will just send in their national letter of intent and then do their actual little signing ceremony later in the day. But it might still get reported by Baylor before. So I don't know the exact answer to that, but we're gonna talk about every single one of them today.
Yeah, so let's get into the guys who have signed, drama out of the way, and on to, bigger and hopefully better things, and certainly bigger when you're talking about some of the linemen they're bringing in and some of the guys that have signed and a couple of big, as you mentioned, transfer portal pledges coming in over the last few days as well. But let's start with big, and let's start with out of state. Let's start with the state of Georgia, and let's start with a big offensive lineman. And Sean Tompkins out of Covington, Georgia, he was one of the first official names today, 6'4", 330 pounds, had offers from Florida and Auburn and Georgia Tech and Tennessee and West Virginia and a few others out there as well. So pretty impressive offer list for Sean Tompkins. Obviously, offensive line's an area of need. They're losing at minimum 4 or 5 starters. So, clearly there's a long way to go to build that room back up. Even if you like some of the depth pieces, just experience-wise, there's going to be a lot that you're losing out on. So, line really a focus on both sides, and Sean Tompkins, an out-of-state get that I know they're pretty excited about.
Yeah, absolutely, and they should be. And now, just based on what happened, he's become my top-rated prospect in this class as of just earlier today because of Austin Novosad's decommitment. So Sean is a beast. I mean, you look at his frame, 6'4", 330 pounds, right around that number. And I know Travis and I have talked about him a lot, but he reminds me a lot of Khalil Keith and is a guy who might be able to get to Khalil Keith's ceiling sooner. It took Khalil a while to adjust to the college game. I don't know that it'll take as long for Sean Tompkins. And this was a huge one for them to hold on to because it really felt like all that momentum from those SEC schools like Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee might eventually went out, but it didn't. And Eric Mateos has done a great job recruiting him, really solidified things with their in-home visit a couple weeks ago. And Tompkins is just an explosive athlete, a guy that I think could play tackle or guard. I kind of view him as the right tackle of the future for this Baylor program. I think he's going to be awesome and could be a guy that comes in and plays sooner rather than later. I think he's that special of an athlete and that special of a prospect.
Yeah, mentioning some of the teams that they fended off or beat out to land him, I do think, circling back for just a brief moment to the other side of the news, is that's also what I think magnifies it as you're looking around at the success that TCU's having. And you're looking around at like a very vocal, marketable staff in Texas Tech, who you're familiar with, and you kind of know their deal, and you respect, how they evaluate. You see like the fun that they're having, and you see Texas is scoring big, even though you're kind of used to that. Oklahoma's, coming off a terrible year by their standards, but they're juiced back up because they've got new recruits coming in, and they've shed some of the quote-unquote dead weight in the portal that Venables, wants to flip over. And I think that's where, going back to the momentum piece as well, like you're seeing it all around you, but you're like looking in your own backyard, like, where is it? And so that's something to realize as well, is that you're kind of looking around and not envious, but just you want some of that same juice that others got right now. So checking back in on the list as it starts to come in as far as the players who have signed. Sean Tompkins out of the state of Georgia, a big guy on the offensive line. Another player, Grayson, that you don't really spotlight this position too often, but special teams, as we saw this year, was a very important piece of the puzzle and a not so great piece that didn't fit all that well at times, and I think it cost them at least a game probably this year, or at least had an impact in a couple of their outcomes. I think of like the Texas game just immediately, the last game of the year, the shanked punt, and how everything just kind of flipped after that moment. And there were certainly others as well. Special teams coach Ronnie Wheats out of there. He was replacing Matthew Pallage, who's at Oregon as a co-defensive coordinator. But he did a great job with special teams. So Ronnie Wheat took over. He's a Dave Aranda guy. He's already out after less than a year. So Palmer Williams coming in as a part of a special teams unit that we don't know who that will be led by just yet. That's one of those decisions that has not been finalized. But clearly with their veteran group, and I think that's why it was even more disappointing that special teams didn't have, I guess, a grander year, was that you had everybody coming back. I mean, everybody, all your legs were coming back. Punting, field goal, kickoff, you name it. So Palmer Williams, where does he fit into the equation?
Yeah, so he kicks and punts, at least he does in high school. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in at Baylor as far as which side he ends up doing. And then, of course, will he do kickoffs, things like that. But in general, he's a guy that was pretty highly rated for kickers/punters in the entire country, inside the top 10 in the nation as far as recruiting rankings go for that particular position. So he's a good pickup. Baylor needs to enhance their special teams. I think he's a guy that could come in and fit into that equation pretty quickly, as that transition period really isn't as hard for special teams guys and kickers in general. But yeah, I think he's a good get for this class and something they definitely need to address going forward, since they're going to lose John Mayers and Isaac Power. They're gone. And so now they're having to reload really at the position.
So special teams addressed with Palmer Williams, and again, we'll wait word on how they'll handle that with a hire, whoever that may end up being, but still on the search for a defensive coordinator and a special teams coordinator and a safeties coach. So you wonder if it'll be like Pallage or Wheat, where it's a special team safeties bundled up into one. That's probably a fair expectation to have, but remains to be seen on that. And, man, you really think about it, Dave Aranda, I mean, I don't put like flips and all that. Like I do want to say this. Like, the amount of freak out, I understand to a certain extent, but it also exposed, I think, especially last night, seeing the thread on the Total Meltdown, of just how many newbies there are to the recruiting game, because major signing day flips are not a new thing to this part of the sport, and it's basically why recruiting became as big as it did in so many ways, was major national signing day flips. But yeah, that's just kind of part of the deal. I think we're seeing a lot of people realize that for the first time. But looking elsewhere on to Baylor's recruiting class as it rolls in. Hawkins Poly, a very a vocal young man on social media as far as building up the class. Saw him announcing his official signature just a little while ago. Tight end out of Houston Stratford High School, 6'4", 242 pounds. Hometown H-Town had offered him. Kansas, USC, SMU, among others, all in the Hawkins Poly sweepstakes. Vanderbilt as well, getting that SEC offer. But Hawkins Poly, been a commit for quite a while now, and seems to be a guy that seems pretty well liked and a heck of a player as well.
Yeah, so he's a really intriguing prospect, because I think after his junior season, you watched his film and you sat there and said, okay, I see flashes, I see what he could be in the future. But boy, oh boy, he had an amazing 7-on-7 circuit this summer. Really showed off his impressive hands. He's great as a receiver. Really just, it was special to watch. It was like every week he was dominating on the 7-on-7 circuit. So that was great. Very intrigued by that. He's about 6'4", 250 pounds. I think development-wise, it's going to be kind of similar to Ben Sims, where Ben came into Baylor as more of a big receiver, and it took him time to understand the nuances of the tight end position. Just took him a little bit of time to develop. Now, Ben was able to play early just because of the depth on the roster, but I think for Hawkins, it's going to be really important that he continues to develop as a route runner and as a blocker. But the signs that I saw during 7-on-7 made me think that this is a guy that is going to pick things up really quickly and is a guy that's going to find ways to just make plays. And I think that's a really special feature that he has as far as when the lights are on, when he has opportunities to go make plays, he absolutely does. And so that's kind of why I'm so intrigued by Hawkins Polley. And he's definitely coming in and helping build this depth that Jeff Grimes is trying to build at the tight end position. So really intrigued by him. Obviously, they've really hit that position hard over the last couple years, and Hawkins is going to fit in really, really well with what they're trying to do with the tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, you're losing Ben Sims. He had a pretty solid year. Probably not as good of – I won't even say probably. He definitely didn't have as good of a year as I think probably most people expected, but still was productive, and you still saw the focus on tight ends. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be, Drake Dabney
and don't forget Drake Dabney's coming off of injury as well.
Yeah, but who's their other tight end that I'm trying to think of here?
Kelsey Johnson.
Yeah, Baylor's roster.
And Cody Mladinko, who's a young guy, but Kelsey's the one that actually got some playing time this year.
So Hawkins will join a group that's young but got talent, and obviously Ben Sims will be taking a few snaps away from folks. So there's a bunch of snaps, quite frankly, to go out there and get. But yeah, getting Drake Dabney healthy will be very important because he does have the makings of a guy you feel like could be one of their better players next season if he's got that health going. So Sean Tompkins is in, Palmer Williams is in, Hawkins Polley is in. Let's continue on rolling through number 4 on the day. LeVar Thornton from Keller Timber Creek High School, 6'3", 170-pound defensive back, had offers from Baylor's bowl opponent tomorrow, Air Force. Also another Service Academy offer from Army, Boise State. Actually had all 3 Service Academies now that I look at his list. Army, Air Force, and Navy all offering him. Another Vanderbilt offer. And Incarnate Word, Boise State, a few others as well. But LeVar Thornton, defensive backfield, another let's face it, man, coming off a 6-6 and whatever it's going to be after tomorrow night, hopefully 7-6. But I mean, you look everywhere, and they're in need of some help. So defensive back, I think that's certainly an area you look back on and you think there's some good young talent there. But that was also a bit of a mess at times this year in terms of guys blown coverages and just kind of all over the place. Part of why Matthew Powell is probably not around anymore is the safety spot. But LeVar Thornton, how does he fit in as a defensive back?
Yeah, this is one where the offer list doesn't match how good he is as a prospect. LeVar Thornton is a physical freak, very fast, very fluid hips. When you watch his film, it is so impressive to watch a guy that's about 6'2.5", 6'3", be able to break on a football the way that he does, which tells you, hey, he could play the cornerback position at the college level, and he absolutely could. I love everything I saw from him this year. Just a great athlete, special prospect in my eyes, and a guy who runs track. There's just a lot to like about him athletically. The thing for him that's going to be fascinating is I could see him playing field safety because Baylor, going back to 2021 when they had JT Woods back there, which I think if you look at his frame, that's a fairly good comp. But when they had him back there, he was a true difference maker. And I think LeVar Thornton could be that as well. But the other thing is Baylor wants long, athletic cornerbacks. They've really been wanting to address that need. Even in the transfer portal, all the guys they're offering are 6 foot or above. And so either way, he's going to have a big impact, whether it's at field safety or cornerback. My bet right now is probably cornerback going forward for him. And so to land a guy like him and landing a guy like Reggie Bush in last year's class gives Baylor just one heck of a future at the cornerback position and in the defensive back room in general. I think they're starting to get better and better. Now it's just about turning that talent into experience and development. But LeVar Thornton is a elite prospect. He's a 4-star, according to our website, even though he's kind of a midline 3-star, according to most others.
How are we feeling how that secondary looks starting next year?
Yeah, I mean, the only guy that we know for sure that is returning, or the only 2 guys, are Lorando Johnson and Devin Lemire, because we don't know if Al Walcott's coming back or not. Haven't really gotten an official word yet.
I mean, like that. Honestly, I think as much of the lack of, I'm gonna start calling it like I do like power rankings. I'm gonna start calling it. They're gonna be my mojo rankings.
Yeah, I've
never seen people have such a hard time with the concept of power rankings. Like, there's always like a comment like, I don't understand how these are measured. It's like they're power rankings. Like this, it's not overly complicated.
It's not.
I'm gonna call them the mojo rankings, just so I think that kind of makes it clear. It's just like it's your swagger. It's like where you are in terms of just like kind of, the energy and the vibe around your program. So, like, for example, in the Mojo rankings, Baylor would be probably like number 8 in the Big 12 right now, just based off of everything. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like the decisions are going to be massive. Like, is TJ Franklin going to come back, for example? We saw a lot of guys who graduated this past weekend. Does that mean that they probably all made their decisions to go ahead and move on, or are perhaps some of those guys coming back as graduates? And that would obviously be massive. But I think that the weird timing of this pre-Christmas bowl game, the hiring and firing of coaches, Mike Leach is passing. I mean, his funeral just yesterday. Just dealing with NIL, the Novosad stuff. I mean, you think about like what Dave Aranda, since the Texas loss, and his staff are trying. Like, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt here, and like the Novosad thing too. Like NIL, yes, of course, had to be in play as far as that goes to some extent. Relationship as well. However you want to percentile that, like I don't really care, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but. That was just like, I don't know what they could have done differently, Like, that's the thing I will say. I don't know what, other than offer him just a massive bag of money, which they're never going to match Phil Knight. I don't care who the booster is. Like, there's nothing else they could do. So,
win games probably would
okay, well,
too.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, that helps everything.
Yeah.
I mean, they get a better quarterback than Novosad if they win more. You know what I mean? Like, I'm stretching it a little, but you understand the point there. But outside of that, like, I really don't know what else they could have done. So you think about all those things they're dealing with right now, and the end of that game tomorrow cannot come fast enough. Just to simply take a freaking breath and then figure out, okay, who's in, who's out, who's signed, who's not, and where do we go from there? I feel like tomorrow night at like midnight or whenever Dave Aranda finally gets the time to sit down on the coaching staff as well, and they can kind of just look over the lay of the land and figure out, all right, now we know who we have in the recruiting class and who we don't, and we know. Well, you start to know who's probably on the roster and who's not. Right. That will help a lot, I think.
It will, and it'll help with the numbers. It'll help with knowing what positions you need to absolutely address. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and so you're exactly right. That will help kind of us narrow our thought process on who's really going to be the big-time playmakers in the secondary and in other positions in general. So, yeah, that's going to be fascinating to watch. But, again, I just want to highlight LeVar Thornton, very, very good prospect and one to absolutely keep an eye on going forward. Could be a guy that plays relatively early in his career as well.
Yeah, and I got on that because I was thinking about Lorando Johnson and was thinking about, what a good player he is, but also thinking about Al Walcott and what a major decision that will be, because that'll be very important. But yes, Thornton, a guy that you could probably expect, like, come on in and get ready to play some snaps right away. So LeVar Thornton, another very important member of this class. And moving on along as they start to get into the double digits now, which is good because the more numbers, the more names, the better. The more signees, the more official guys that we can talk about. But DK Kalu, it was a big get several months back when he made his pledge to Baylor, the defensive tackle, 6'3", 270 out of Ridge Point High School in Mo City, Missouri City, Texas. Picked the Bears over the likes of hometown Houston against the Big 12 foes in Iowa State and Kansas State. TCU as well was also in the running for him. Georgia Tech out of the ACC and a few others sandwiched in between as well. But DK Kalu, name should sound a bit familiar. There is some lineage there when it comes to the NFL ranks. And your thoughts? I know this was a guy that, in the beginning of this class's process, that this was a name that was really a big one that they had keyed in on.
Yeah, and he's a borderline 4-star, very high 3-star, might move up to the 4-star territory. He had a really, really good senior year, was very productive at Ridge Point, helped take them on a little bit of a playoff run, a surprise playoff run, actually, as they pulled off an upset against Katie Tompkins in the first round of the playoffs. But very good player, a guy who I see actually being able to get into the backfield from a defensive tackle position or a nose tackle position, which you don't always see. You got guys like, you have a guy like Apu, who's just massive. His frame's crazy, but he had the ability to actually get into the backfield. And then you got a guy like Bravion Roy, who just was elite at stopping the run and not giving up any ground. DK reminds me more of that Apu mold where he could get to like 330 pounds and still be able to be elusive enough to get around defensive linemen or offensive linemen. So I really like his game. He's a guy who I'm very, very high on, and he was a priority in this class from day one. I see him sliding in probably at nose tackle, potentially defensive tackle, depending on how Baylor decides to align their fronts going forward after the loss of Apu. But yeah, DK, very interesting. Just note on him. He took his official visit to Baylor June 10th, and then he had an official visit with Kansas State on June 24th. And just kind of crazy how, he took that official visit, Kansas State coming off of, a decent season. You just wonder if they had been coming off the Big 12 championship, if maybe that would have been more of a threat to Baylor. But in general, those were kind of his top two schools at the very end of things. And obviously he chose the Bears.
So DK Kalu, man, that defensive line is going to be another area, like I was just talking about, of you don't quite know what is in the cupboard for next year because Apu hasn't officially declared for the draft, or has he?
He hasn't, but he's.
The Senior Bowl basically announced that he was going to be in the game like 2 weeks ago, and I don't know if that was intentional or if that was greenlit or whatever, but they basically announced him without announcing him playing in the game. Can he play in the Senior Bowl?
Yeah.
But he's a junior.
He graduated.
Oh, did he? Okay.
I
guess I missed that.
He's a redshirt junior, isn't he?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I'm so confused.
I'm pretty sure he's got.
All right.
Yeah, he's got another year, but yeah, he's gonna. Very likely he's gonna be gone, and that's why Baylor's taken so many defensive linemen in this class.
That one you can already chalk up. Like you can just go ahead and figure he's gone. And I was figuring he was gone like this time a year ago, basically.
But there are other question marks there with Cole Maxwell, Braden Utley, TJ Franklin. Like, decisions have to be made. But in general, this class is really addressing the concerns that they have lower on the roster, right? I mean, if you got rid of all those seniors, you're basically left with Gabe Hall and then a bunch of guys who haven't played any, hardly any meaningful snaps.
Yeah, so again, those decisions starting post-bowl game, which is what you'd expect. Guys will play their last game and then start to weigh their decisions and all of that. Some of them already have, clearly. You've had a couple guys go on the portal, but we know there's going to be more than there has been, and that's just a matter of getting through this season, and that's tomorrow night. So, yeah, the defensive line, another area where you really wonder who could still be in the mix to return, and the more the merrier, quite frankly, and it'd be interesting to see how that group changes with just the change in defensive minds because no more Ron Roberts there. So how does that affect things, and how is that group different as a result of all of that? So that remains to be seen, but good to get a guy like DK Kalu, and he's not by any means the only offensive lineman, big theme on both sides of the football because they're losing so much. Again, if you paid any attention to Baylor coming into this year, then those were the two areas where the most focus was on being positives, was how much they had coming back on both of those lines. So they stand to lose a lot. Another guy who will be helping out, you would imagine, on the defensive line sooner rather than later. And they didn't really hit big locally all that much this year. And I'm going to start wondering about that a little bit more. Like, there's some like a Jelani McDonald. Like, why is he not being recruited by Baylor? Mikael Harrison Pilot.
On him.
Yeah, like, I don't know. And then you had I need to ask you about Torian York too at some point. I needed to ask you some questions about that. So that was another one that was a Temple guy and you thought was in the fold, and then ends up where he's now committed to Texas A&M. So just not a lot of success really in the immediate area of Waco, Temple, Killeen, but not a total lack of success either. Is Brendan Bett, defensive tackle, 6'5", 270 out of Killeen. And more particularly Ellison High School. He's an Ellison Eagle. Picked the Bears back in the summertime over the likes of Texas Tech and U of H. A lot of wins over Houston on this list. U of H, and Colorado, SMU was in on a lot of these guys as well. But Bet picking the Bears over the likes of those folks. And, another one on the D-line.
Yeah, continuing to win battles against Texas Tech is going to be key, of course. It always is. And, TCU as well is in that mix. You got to beat those schools. Houston, when they enter the Big 12, that's going to be an important team to beat out in recruiting. But Brendan Bett, really good prospect as well. And, again, it's consistent with the theme of tall, long, rangy prospect who has the ability to put on a lot more size. And that's what Brendan Bett has. He's about 6'5", 270 is where we have him listed. I wouldn't be shocked if he's actually closer to 285 already. Big prospect. He's going to get to about probably 320 if they want him to. He can absolutely get there. The thing with him is he's got a lot of power and explosiveness, and that's what really jumps out on film to me from Brendan Bett, is just that ability to create positive momentum immediately off of the snap. And that's huge. That's key. And that's the game of football, right? Is being quicker to the ball. And that's exactly what Bett is. So very impressive prospect, long arms, which is what you need to be a pro and get to the NFL. You got to have long arms. You got to have the measurables. And he's a guy that's got he's got a high ceiling, but he also has a sneaky high floor in my eyes, because of just, he already has that raw ability and he already has the size to be productive early in his career. But my anticipation is that he'll probably redshirt this year and take some time. They got Devontae Tizino from Killeen Ellison the year before. I think Bett will take a similar route as Tizino did.
Well, Killeen, a place that's continuing to grow. It's got another high school, I think, in the works now. They're up to like 5-6 high schools, I think, by the time it's all said and done the next couple of years. I'm losing track, quite honestly. I mean, the area is exploding. But that's, Belton's added a new high school here recently. Waco's redoing some schools. So it's an area where there's a lot of movement and a lot of growth, but Killeen stays, no matter, the number of high schools or not, has stayed a pretty talent-rich place. And a lot of that has to do with not only the truly local folks, but with Fort Hood, a lot of incoming, outgoing talent, moving in, moving out, and we've seen a lot of that over the years. But yeah, I mean, that's a couple of guys from Ellison in a row that they've landed now. So that is good to see, because they haven't always had a ton of success in Killeen. And that's just, again, it's a mixed bag. Like, there's a lot of guys who maybe play for Killeen, but they're from like Wyoming or from California or whatever. So there's not like that local tie. And even then, it's sort of like Temple, and Belton's very heavy Longhorn, where the further south towards Austin you go, like the closer there is that UT pull as well. So you always are fighting that with the Killeen, Temple, Belton area too. But good to see them having success. And I don't want to make it sound like they're not having any local success, because I just made the comment a few minutes ago about, kind of where's that, like the Jelani McDonald's, who has not made his official choice. Seems like he could be going to Texas. We'll see the stellar athlete from Connolly, but he hasn't made up his mind just yet. But that does lead me, as we talk about Brendan Bett, and that is a good local get. But let's go to Torian York. So Torian York, linebacker from Temple High School, was committed for the longest time. TJ Franklin obviously played at Temple. They had Ashton Logan up until recently, who played at Temple. And Temple's also sent a lot of guys to Texas over the years. But had Torian York in the bag. And, man, I really, at this point, I am not in favor of interviewing, like, recruits, especially from the high school ranks, immediately when they commit. It's just too flip-floppy nowadays, And you think about, like, better than anybody, all the interviews with guys who don't end up signing somewhere, who we started off the show talking about, for example. But we talked to Torian York and did so a couple times, and I was super impressed with him. Like, hard worker, first one in, last one out type of guy. This is a young man who not only, like, just gets it off the field, but works exceptionally hard. And everybody says that, but, like, it's true. It's not just talk with him. I remember hearing him talk about, like, Scott Stewart, his high school coach, pulling up to the field house like 5:45. It's still dark out, and there's a guy running on the field. It's Torian York, like, for no reason other than just wanting to work. He loves to work. So you'd think, like, all those attributes that you'd really love him, but he ends up decommitting just a few days ago. And, the thought on the board somewhat, and I know one of our analysts is like, oh, I think that's actually a good thing. I think he's not fast enough, or whatever the reasoning, like, just trying to rationalize it or whatever. But it bummed me out, because I liked his personality, I liked his work ethic and all of that. So explain to me how he ends up at Texas A&M. What went down here? Was it Ron Roberts being kind of the lead guy with him, and then he's gone, so now Torian's interest wanes? Because if he had ended up at, like, SFA, you'd say, okay, well, he's averaging out to where he probably should be. But he's going to the freaking SEC and playing for A&M, who plays, if anything, good defense. So help me figure this out here.
Yeah, so I mean, initially, I think many people thought he was going to Duke. A lot of people thought that's what was going to happen. He took an official visit there. There was interest in Duke for sure, but I think people were missing out on the larger point of A&M was in contact with him. And I think that was a big thing that kind of flipped him a little bit. I think it was truly the A&M interest and the A&M offer that at the end of the day flipped Torian York. And I mean, can you really blame him? I mean, it's going to the SEC. I understand all that. He was committed to Baylor for a long time, lost the defense coordinator in Ron Roberts, who obviously he'd gotten to know pretty well. For most of these defensive guys, that loss really didn't mean much because Dave Aranda was still at Baylor. And, you know, for defensive guys, you know, to have a defensive head coach, that matters way more than who the defense coordinator is. But yeah, I think it was more so the interest from A&M that eventually got him to flip. And A&M is extremely linebacker needy. If you see their recent offers, they've been throwing out linebacker offers like candy to guys who don't even have big-time offer lists. So in general, I think Torian saw an opportunity there. A&M actually made him a very big priority. They offered, he got on an official visit, and then immediately committed. So good for him, like you said, great kid.
Yeah, I'm happy for him. I wanted to know, like, because you so often see when guys, and this is not exclusive to Baylor by any means. This is college football. Every fan base acts the same. They all act like they're above the others and better than certain ones, but everybody's fan bases basically act the same when it comes to recruiting. So like you lose a guy and it's like, oh well, we didn't want him anyways, or he wasn't really fitting and so I started to see some of that with Torian York and like, oh, he's not fast or whatever it was. And I was just like, man, something's not adding up because now here comes A&M. Like that doesn't make any sense that they would pursue him if that was, a talent issue. So that's why I asked that question.
I will say, though, the loss of Christian Brathwaite, much bigger than
to
the loss of
LSU
Torian
several
York.
weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the better prospect, the more prototypical prospect. And if you look at Baylor's depth chart, I mean, I think Torian is going to be a good football player. I don't necessarily think his ceiling is through the roof, but I think his floor is very high because, like you said, he's always going to be there. He's always going to really outwork the guy next to you. And so you love guys like that. I mean, Dylan Doyle was like that. And so, you love those kind of guys, but also you look at Baylor's depth chart and it's like, I don't know that they absolutely needed an interior linebacker in this class, and now you can use those spots for other transfers that maybe will impact you for next season more. So I'm not going to say it wasn't a loss because they wanted Torian. They did. But at the end of the day, it also gives them an opportunity to maybe go attack another position through the portal.
Yeah, I just wanted to make some sense of that because of just the way it was sort of thought to be explained, not by staff or anything, but just sort of the way it was taken by the fans. I wanted to get some clarity on that. So happy for Torian York. Good get for the Aggies. Got a great young man, and good luck to him. But moving on along to guys who are official for Baylor. Another one coming in on the offensive line. And, again, that's an area where they really are stacking up as much as possible in numbers. But Wes Tucker out of Argyle, obviously a place that knows winning and knows winning a lot every year, but 6'5", 265-pounder. Another KU offer here that the Bears were able to beat out, although KU did get their measure of revenge there towards the end with was it
Calvin
Clements,
who's from Lawrence,
Kansas. I mean, it's like, I don't fault anybody. The hometown team offers you. I mean, that just makes sense. That'd be a cool dream come true. But Colorado State, Kansas, La Tech, Texas Tech again, and some others. Tulane, obviously coming off of a very good year. But what do you like about Wes Tucker, another one on the offensive line?
Yeah, another win over Texas Tech, and his brother Jack, his older brother, actually plays at Texas Tech as well. So nice to see Baylor get a win there. I will say, the coolest thing about Wes was he showed up at a Baylor camp, and Baylor commits don't have to, really do much at these camps. They can literally just show up, hang out with the coaches because they're already committed, right? You don't have anything to prove. No, Wes literally was out there competing against all these guys who are trying to get offers, and Wes was out there, trying to win the day. And I love seeing that. It showed the kind of hard work and effort that he's going to put in to the Baylor program. Another guy that won't get outworked at all. Like you can just tell he's a very hard worker, and he committed right after his visit and camp trip to Baylor. So I like him a lot. I think he's one of those guys that, once again, you watch his junior film and you say, okay, I think he's good. I can see areas that he can definitely improve and get better. And then you turn on his senior film and it's a night and day difference. He took a big jump from his junior to senior year, which was awesome to see. Got stronger. It seemed like he got faster as well, and just continued to have that physical mindset. He's the guy where you turn on the film and you do not see him stop until a play is finished, which is something that I know Eric Mateos and that offensive line room, they love that. They don't want their guys to stop until the whistle, play through the whistle, actually. And that's exactly what Wes Tucker brings to the table. So another good prospect, and he's actually an early enrollee. So he'll be at Baylor here in, 3 weeks when the early enrollees arrive in the middle of January.
So based on our 2 interviews, we're probably going to have to go ahead and jump the gun on one of them and not wait till the guy actually signs.
Let's do Robinson because he's signing at 9.
Okay, so we'll do Isaiah Robinson. If you want to go ahead and cue that up, Jacob, and just let me know when you get that ready. But first, I want to go to a national recruiting note. I haven't been able to really do this because we've been locked in on just getting through, each player and giving them, a little bit of a time to kind of explain where they're coming from and how we got here and how they're ending up in green and gold and all that. But I do want to sprinkle in things from time to time, which is why I asked about Torian York, although that's still somewhat Baylor related. But one story that is definitely not anywhere close to Baylor related, but is interesting. And there's a lot, probably more that I just haven't caught because I haven't been able to really just sit and stare at Twitter like we normally would. But Cormani McClain, the big-time 5-star cornerback, right? Like number 2 player, I believe, in the country behind Arch Manning, which I know people have had furious debates about whether or not Arch is really the number 1 player in the country, but, whatever. Arch did officially sign with Texas. Jonte Cook, I think, just signed with Texas officially, so the Longhorns are loading up. But Cormani McClain, arguably top player in the country, I think most people would be able to have an argument there. Will not be signing today, according to his mother. So will not be signing with the Miami Hurricanes, which is where he's been committed. Number 2 overall player, had committed a little while back, but he's not going to be committing. So there's just a little signing day, just drama bubbling. You just never know when signing day rolls around. So we'll see what that ends up leading into and whether he ends up a cane when all is said and done. But you talk about a guy who's probably got NIL offers being thrown at him like, I mean, I don't even know what a good comparison would be of getting things thrown at you, like a guy standing in the batter's box and having 10 pitchers throw, a fastball at you. That's basically NIL offers coming at someone like him.
He's still committed to Miami, and he's one of those rare misses by Steve Wiltfong, actually. Everyone thought he was going to go to Florida, ended up committing to Miami. And so, for him not to commit today, there's definitely meaning there's probably something in the works there.
Exactly, yeah. So that's what I thought would be worth mentioning. So something to keep an eye on there in terms of overall recruiting drama. And if he ends up back at Florida, that would be something, man. The trash talk.
Oh, yeah.
I ran into a Spaces last night, which I don't really love the Spaces thing because it's always like something really random that doesn't really apply to me. It's just some follower that I'm following. It's like they're watching like whatever it may be, but somehow or another, somebody was watching a Miami Spaces, and you talk about just like a Florida fan ended up there, and it's so wild. So I could only imagine what that would turn into post a Cormani McClain flip back to the Gators. But we'll see on that. He's still committed to Miami, as you said, but definitely something to keep an eye on as he is apparently not signing today. So the young man who's going to be signing here right about now, and we can go ahead and get into his interview because we got some other names that we need to eventually get through here as well. But let's go ahead and, I guess, talk about Isaiah Robinson and what he brings to the table for Baylor, not only as a prospect, but just kind of looking at him as in terms of the lead into this offensive tackle, 6'7", 270 plus pounds, had offers from the likes of A&M and Texas and LSU and a bunch of other places as well, out of Arlington, Texas and Lamar High School. Before we hear from him, a big get for Eric Mateos.
Yeah, best offer list in the class, I would say, goes to Isaiah Robinson, a guy that's been a national recruit since his sophomore year of high school. His first offer, which I talk about, during this interview with him, his first offer, which is so rare, was from Texas, which is just, that doesn't happen. It's usually, smaller schools offer first, but Texas was actually his first offer. Really long arms. I know that one thing that was disappointing for him was the fact that this year he kept dealing with injuries. And so he's working on getting healthy. He's also the only All-American Bowl member now that Austin has decommitted. He's the only one now. So he'll be playing, he's hoping to play in the All-American Bowl this year. He'll at least be there attending practices. He doesn't know quite yet if he'll be able to be cleared to play in that game quite yet. But great prospect, consensus 4-star guy. I see him as a 4-star prospect in general because of the simple fact that he's got all the measurables you could possibly want. And I think of all the fits he could have gone to as far as schemes go, the wide zone is the most perfect for him. He can move, very mobile guy, strong, athletic, and a guy that give him time to develop a little bit, and he could develop into a very, very good left tackle for this Baylor roster. And so, yeah, great prospect, very high-end target, and a guy that Baylor won against a lot of schools. I mean, we're talking USC, Texas, Tennessee, TCU, Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, Miami, LSU, Ole Miss, Oklahoma State. Tons of great offers, very good prospect, and one that I think Baylor fans will be really, really happy about. And his major is probably the most interesting of any of the guys in this class, which
General
is
studies?
Theater. Theater major.
Okay.
His top three
Sweet.
schools were Cal, Howard, and Baylor at the end because of the theater part of things. And he ended up choosing Baylor for some reasons that he'll talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, well, let's hear from him. General studies is the easy go-to because it's kind of like what you start off with and you figure it out. But somebody to already have their mind on something as specific as that in particular is very interesting. So let's hear from him. A couple of interviews, a part of this show, and this is one of them. And don't worry, he's signing. He's got the table all set up. He's got the family surrounding him in green and gold. Brian Etheridge is out there. He's already taken a snap of him. So he's signing at any given moment if he hasn't already. So let's go ahead and make it official and hear a little bit more about the big-time offensive line prospect that is now becoming a Baylor Bear, Isaiah Robinson with Grayson Grunhafer.
Welcome into the Baylor Signing Day show. I'm, of course, Grayson Grunhafer, and we're getting to talk to Arlington Lamar offensive lineman Isaiah Robinson. Zay, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. It feels kind of official now. So definitely kind of on cloud nine right now.
That's awesome, man. I know, getting to sign, I mean, what does that moment mean to you, and what does that mean to your family as well?
I mean, to me, it just feels like I couldn't be more proud of myself. And I know they aren't. I know they could be more proud of me either. Just with how far I've come in this whole process from time I was just a sophomore to now, it kind of feels surreal.
That's awesome, man. So how I kind of like to do this, we're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to talk about some things early on in your recruitment and then kind of how we got here to this point. But you kind of had an interesting journey because I think most kids, when they get their first offer, it's typically maybe a group of 5 school or a smaller school. Your first offer was from Texas.
Yeah.
What was that like, getting that first offer? And it was, I believe, in the middle of your sophomore season, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was absolutely insane. I mean, when it first came to my mind that I'm I'm gonna kind of blow up, right? It was kind of doing my very first interview, and then after that, I got a call from. I talked to Coach Hand, who was the current O-line coach at Texas, and I mean, he offered me, and at the time, as I was talking to him, it didn't really hit me, but once we hung up, it was kind of whoa, that really just happened. So I mean, it was definitely I couldn't really believe it at the time, and then once I told everyone just kind of went crazy.
Yeah, I mean, That's, I mean, it's just really cool to see that so early. And I mean, how do you feel like you handled that, being so young and getting that first offer? I know that was probably a lot for you at that age.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, I think I handled it pretty well. I mean, like I've always been a very humble person. So, I mean, I didn't go around just kind of flaunting it to everyone. If anything, I kind of kept it to myself a little bit. Except for people who knew already, except for everyone who already knew, like, it wasn't like, if you didn't really know me, it wouldn't seem like that much of a big deal to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you just fast forward, I don't even know how long, but it wasn't very long. And then Baylor came with the second offer. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about getting that first offer and just that offer from Baylor, at least?
I mean, it was nice. I mean, it was really cool. I mean, like, Texas is one, like, getting 2 D1 offers in like the span of like a month is absolutely insane. And like, especially as a sophomore, like, just like me and my family just think about you're getting this much attention now. Just think about how much attention you'll get in the next 2 years. So, I mean, yeah, it was crazy. It was really cool.
Yeah, and that attention definitely came. You ended up with 28 offers, something like that. You might have ended up with more that maybe you didn't report, but 28 offers is kind of the number I'm working with. Every Power 5 conference is represented in those offers as well, which is super cool. I think that's awesome. Sitting back and looking at it and going, man, 28 offers, every Power 5 conference, got offers from California all the way to, Florida. You got offers just across the country. How cool is that? And how's that make you feel to know that you accomplished that?
It makes me feel, it's probably one of the biggest accomplishments I've ever made in my life, to be completely honest. I mean, like, to have offers literally from coast to coast, it's like, not many people can say that they've achieved that. And I have. So it's a really great feeling. It's a very humbling feeling. But yeah, it's awesome.
And as those offers kind of came in, and as the kind of year or two passed, take me through that journey of just offer. And I know you took some visits as well throughout that time period too, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of take me through that.
Yeah. I mean, so like after like the first 2, 3, 4, it was really like, wow, like this is really happening. But like, I would say probably the middle of my junior year, I think it was at one point I got like 5 offers in a week. It was like, oh wow. I was like, okay. I would say probably at one point it did get kind of redundant, I would say. I mean, I was always grateful for everyone I got, but I mean, like, it would be like, blessed to receive an offer from here, then like 2 days later, blessed to receive an offer from here. The very next day, blessed to receive another offer, right? So I mean, it felt kind of redundant at some points, but I mean, it really was a really great experience.
Was there an offer kind of during that process and I know you're kind of the things that you care about change as you get older, but was there an offer that when you got it, you're like, man, I really, like, I've made it to this point where I feel like, I have this amazing offer list and this offer really kind of solidifies that?
It was definitely when I got an offer from USC, because before I started getting recruited, USC was my dream school. And so once that offer came, I was like, wow, I really did it. Like, I did it. Like, I got the opportunity to go to my dream school. So yeah, definitely I would say USC.
Awesome, man. So kind of going forward through time a little bit, you ended up with Baylor versus Cal and Howard. I think those were your final 3. What was it about those 3 schools that really stood out to you at that kind of moment when you were deciding?
As far as like HBCUs, Howard was definitely my dream school as far as HBCUs go. I mean, like, talking to the coaches there, is like, they had pretty much everything I really could have asked for. It was like a great acting program. Like, their alumni base is absolutely insane. athletic wise, they're awesome. Academic wise, it's great. And then same thing with Cal, really. It's like, my parents will tell you this. The first conversation I had with one of the Cal coaches, like, I came back and I told them, like, I don't know what it is about. I don't know what it was about that conversation, but like my interest in Cal has definitely been piqued. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, to this day, I don't know what it was about that conversation, but it was like kind of a light bulb went off in my head. It's like, okay, I like y'all. And then like with Baylor, the funny thing is when Baylor first offered me, and like as time kind of went on, I would say probably throughout the rest of my sophomore year and kind of beginning of my junior year, Baylor probably wasn't even near the top of my list. I think it's like once Coach Aranda came in and I started talking to Coach Mateos and all of them, like it was like a light switch. Like everything just flipped for them. Yeah.
I remember there was a time where you weren't hearing from, like, I would reach out to you and it's like, I'm not hearing from them. Like I'm, hearing from these other schools. I remember that. And that's like crazy to think about. Okay. We'll talk about Mateos and Aranda here in a minute, but I did want to ask you, you took your official visit June 17th to Baylor. What was the biggest thing for you, going on that trip? And it was also in the midst of you taking trips elsewhere, to Cal, I think was also in the mix right there. What was that trip like for you, and kind of what were your biggest takeaways?
It was awesome. I mean, the biggest thing for me was like, probably it's like where it is, like just the city of Waco itself. And I mean, like throughout my recruiting, location was never a huge factor for me. I mean, like, obviously I was considering going all the way to California. So location was never a huge factor for me. But like, now that I've been committed for as long as I have been now, the fact that it's only like an hour and a half away from home, it is a really nice feeling. And then, I mean, like, the Waco itself is definitely somewhere I can see myself going to college, like as far as college towns go. Because like me, I'm not a very outgoing person. I'm definitely more to myself. And like Waco, I guess you could say it's kind of a happy medium of like party city sort of kind of, and like but at the same time a small town. Like it's not like a LA or Austin where it's something crazy going on happening every night. But it's also not like a really small town where there's nothing to do. Right.
So this is something that you told me after you committed, and it sounds exactly like what you're saying right now. So the quote was, ultimately, Baylor in the city of Waco has my type of people. It just seems like somewhere I would really enjoy going to college. I feel really good about Baylor. What stood out the most is how the school in this city is really reserved like me. I do feel like it's a place I would enjoy living during and after college. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
Yeah. So I do have to ask you, I know you mentioned the fact that you like that Baylor's kind of close to you. Was there a big part of you that was kind of thinking, even though you're going to be playing football, you're also big into theater? Is that big that like your parents are going to be able to like come see those performances as well?
Yeah, I would say it is, because like one thing about my parents, they will always make an effort to come see me no matter what it is. So I mean, like the fact that it's closer does make it easier for them to come see those types of things. But yeah, it is definitely a good thing.
Is theater still something you really, you're big into, and that's what you want to pursue in college?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. What is it about theater that you just love?
I don't know what it is about it. Like, I started when I was, I think, 11 years old. And then from there, I kind of fell in love with it.
I know we talked quite a bit about that, just kind of like how that was big for you, and probably a big reason why Howard and Cal were also kind of in the mix as well. Do you feel like Baylor offers you plenty of opportunities with that, though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, it does.
Awesome, man. So ultimately, why'd you choose Baylor? Was there one moment just that led you to it?
really when it came down to it, it was why not Baylor?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like we got all these schools coming at me, and they're all great. But it's like with Baylor, it was just something I felt like, especially I think my official visit solidified it. It was something that I felt like I didn't feel with any other school. And like talking to my parents, it was really just why not Baylor?
Yeah.
Like at that point, Baylor would have had to given me a reason to not want to commit.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So I know you mentioned your relationship with Mateos. So let's start with him. We'll talk about Aranda here in a minute, but Eric Mateos, what is it about him that you connected with, and what is it about like his philosophy that you feel like you can really relate to?
Really with Coach Mateos, it was like he can be your coach at one point and then be your best friend at another. Like that's how I feel. Like that's how I felt every time we'll talk on the phone. Every time I visited Baylor on my official, all that. It was like at that point it's like during those moments I didn't see him as a coach. I saw him as a friend, someone I could like really go to for anything really.
Yeah. And that's big, right? That person over player thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So what is it kind of, I know we've talked a lot of off field and things like that, but specifically Eric Mateos, Jeff Grimes, that RVO wide zone scheme. How do you think you fit into that? And why is that such an appealing offense to be in?
I mean, I'm a huge guy. I mean, like, so doing that, like anytime we ran those types of plays at Lamar, I'd always saw it as an opportunity to really basically make this a highlight play. Because I would say those are my best plays at Lamar. I mean, just because, when Coach Mateos visited my house not too long ago, he was telling us, like, he recruits guys who can run. And that's the main reason why they stayed on me so hard. Because, like, if you look at my highlight tape, you can see times where I would be sprinting down the field. I mean, I know I could really shine with that scheme.
Yeah, definitely. And I know this year was challenging for you. I know you got injured early. Can you just explain kind of what happened? I know it was like the first game of the year, right?
Yeah, it was our second game. The second game of the season. It was actually the second play of the game. Someone basically fell on my leg, and my knee kind of dislocated. And what sucked about it is that I had injured that same knee my sophomore year. So it was kind of just a redo basically. And like I played the rest of the first quarter, but after that, we called it for me.
Yeah. And I know you came back late in the year though. You played like the last 4 games, right?
So yeah, I missed the next 3 games. Yeah, I missed the next 3 games. And then the game I came back, they actually had me in as just a tight end for like a specific formation that we would run where I would go in as tight end. So I played that game at tight end. And then what's crazy is that I think in the middle of the fourth quarter, the guy that was filling in for me at left tackle, he gets hurt. So now I have to go back in at left tackle. So I finished that game at left tackle. I finished that game at tackle. And then going to the other game. And then the next game, I'm playing left tackle again. And then right before halftime, I get hurt again.
Oh my gosh.
And so after that, we called it for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that's tough. How are you feeling now physically?
I'm doing better. I actually just came home from physical therapy not too long ago. But it's getting better. Like the biggest thing it was for me, it was a lot of swelling in my knee, and it's pretty much gone for the most part. I mean, it's still some swelling, but it's really nothing noticeable.
Yeah.
And then as far as like pain goes, I'll have some working out, but like just doing everyday things, I haven't really felt anything. So I'm doing pretty good.
Good, man. So I was going to ask you this. So I guess I'll start with the positive because I don't know if there's going to be a negative to this, but the All-American Bowl, you got announced. You're a member of the All-American Bowl. First of all, I know it's you and Austin Novosad. Both of you got honored with that award and recognition. What was that like for you to hear that, you're one of the best players in the country getting an offer like that?
It was, again, definitely one of those surreal moments, like being recognized as one of the best players in the whole country. Again, it's not something everyone can say, and it's something I can't say. So, I mean, it was kind of emotional, to be honest. Like, when I got the announcement that I was chosen, me and my family, you would have thought we were a bunch of wild animals. We went absolutely.
Was that something that had always been like on y'all's radar, or?
It was, especially once I started really getting as much recognition as I had. It was definitely right then it became something like I wanted to shoot for.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. So I guess the bad news is I'm taking it you're not going to play in that game.
Right now that's actually what I'm working towards.
Okay.
Making sure my knee is okay for it. Hopefully I will be able to play. But right now it's kind of just see how it goes.
Okay. Are you going to be there in San Antonio though for the practices and everything?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome. I'll be there too. So really excited about that. That's going to be an awesome time down there in San Antonio. So you mentioned your parents. Just kind of how excited are they for signing day and just for you to kind of officially make it official?
It was funny. And I'm going to call my dad out real quick. We actually got the papers not too long ago, for my actual letter of intent not too long ago. And my parents saw it before I did. And my dad saw it and he told me he kind of shed a little tear because he was looking at it and it showed how, like, as far as like tuition and all that, how everything was full, like a full scholarship. And it was like, they could have just told me how proud of me they are. And it was a really good feeling.
That's great, man. So before I let you go, I do want to put you on the spot really quick, but is there anything you want to say to Baylor Nation just about how excited you are for this opportunity to officially be a Baylor Bear?
I couldn't be more excited for it. I mean, like this, like it seems like it's all coming full circle for me from my very first offer to now. It's like, it's been a really, really long journey. Some ups, some downs, but extremely grateful and couldn't be more excited to be with Baylor.
So there you go. There's Isaiah Robinson, who is now officially signed to the Baylor 2023 class. A conversation with Grayson, and a really good young man, and good to hear his thoughts on a lot of different things, including signing with the Bears. Officially now, you can add him into this growing class, which is well into the double digits, and we're going to get back to talking about some of these guys in depth, but we addressed him right before the interview, so we can check him off. And another thing we can check off is, not only has Baylor been active in the transfer portal, but one of their guys who dipped into the transfer portal has now apparently made a decision. Josh Fleeks, who we haven't heard about since he entered the transfer portal, quite frankly, which was, that was like mid-October, I think was about when that was. It's never really, I don't know, it never clicked all the way. There was like a moment here and a moment there, but there was, never really felt like he hit a full stride in Waco. But sometimes you just need a little change of scenery. So he dipped in the transfer portal mid-year, and he is going to be reuniting with Matt Rule. He's heading to Nebraska. So Josh Fleeks, former Cedar Hill star and former Baylor wide receiver / running back, was in the portal and has now made his decision on signing day, heading to Nebraska. So good for him.
Yeah, and everyone thought he was going to end up at Tech. So
yeah, I did.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and obviously the Rule connection there played a big role in that. So yeah, he's going to Nebraska. Devin Neal's going to Louisville, and Kyron Drones is going to Virginia Tech. So that's the only ones unaccounted for are Seth Jones and Micah Mazuka are the two left.
Yes, and Mazuka just entered, Sunday was that when he entered the transfer portal?
Yeah.
And Seth Jones has been in there for a little while now, so we'll see what happens with him. But, yeah, I just wanted to pass that along. So that's official. Josh Fleek's reuniting with Matt Rule. And I think with Tech, I think there's interest there, but I just think numbers-wise and what they already have and all of that wasn't like a must-have for Joey to have a Cedar Hill reunion.
You have to have room for him because he's a very specific football player.
Yes.
He's going to have to play in the slot. You're going to give him some carries. So, yeah, I agree that some people just don't have room for him, some schools.
All right, so let's get back to some of these because we're going to have Travis Roeder join us here in about a half hour, and we've got another interview to get to as well. But we've taken a bit of a pause on the signees. So dipping back into that, we've talked about Sean Tompkins and Palmer Williams and Hawkins Pauley and LeVar Thornton and DK Kalu, Brendan Bett, Wes Tucker, and Isaiah Robinson. Getting back into the swing of things, Carl Williams IV, getting into the boot of Louisiana, Baton Rouge, a Southern Lab product. Obviously, there's some members of the staff that know that area quite well, including the head coach and Dave Aranda, but others too. And another one in the secondary had offers from Kentucky and Missouri out of the SEC, as well as Vanderbilt, but then also had Southern and Grambling and La Tech part of his offer list as well. So 6 foot 170. Where does Carl Williams IV fit in?
Yeah, so again, another guy in their secondary that's very fast. He's got a 10,500 meter time, so he's shown some flashes of that elite speed. I liked his film this year. Again, a good cornerback prospect, one that I think will stick at cornerback. I think he fits in really well there in Baylor's defensive scheme. Plays physical, makes plays on the football, which is very important. Will be able to create turnovers at the next level. And he's an early enrollee, so he's a guy that's going to get on campus early, going to have an opportunity to grow and develop his craft. I think it'll probably take him a couple years before he's a fixture in the Baylor secondary, but a guy that, high 3-star type prospect, solid offer list, even though it's not the most extensive with Missouri, Vanderbilt, Kentucky type offers, but one that took his official visit and then committed pretty quickly after that. So a guy that Baylor targeted, really wanted out of Louisiana, and they were able to land him. So he fits in really well with what they're trying to build at the cornerback position.
So welcome Carl Williams IV into the fold. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players that we've now rolled through. There's another 5 that have now signed. So that's 13 of the 21. And there's also a couple of transfers as well. So let's keep on keeping on. I did want to make mention that we talked about Cormani McClain a little while ago, and number 2 overall prospect, or arguably number 1 cornerback, was committed or is committed to Miami, but it's not signing today. He was previously a Florida guy, but was just reading some of the thoughts on him delaying his signing day announcement, and a lot of Deion Sanders and Colorado mentions. So just there's not I don't feel like there's a ton of major dramatic storylines so far early this morning. Really, that's probably one of the biggest ones. I think Deion's also in on Malachi Coleman, and he's getting in on a couple of other big-name guys, and so that'll be really interesting to watch, obviously with Colorado. But I think him in Nebraska, that's a big battle for Malachi Coleman coming up here in about, I think, in the next hour. So that'll be a big one for either Deion or Matt Rule in terms of getting his commitment there. But, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So, taking a look around the country, I don't think there's a whole lot of other drama, but, we're pretty focused and locked in on Baylor. And let's stay locked in on that and get through some of these names so we have time left to kind of maneuver around however we so choose. And let's go to Caden Jenkins as he follows Carl Williams IV, another defensive back. Caden Jenkins out of Louisville, Texas, and Louisville High School. Another Arkansas offer. Had some Big Ten love as well, but from the SEC, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Out of the Big Ten, you had Indiana and Iowa, as well as Purdue, and then Texas Tech again, K-State as well out of the Big 12. Washington State out of the Pac. So offers from, I think, pretty much every Power 5 conference, save the ACC, it looks like. But really impressive offer list. UTSA also a program that you see them listed, that there's probably a good bet that this is a pretty good evaluation as well. So your thoughts on Caden Jenkins out of Louisville, cornerback?
Yeah, and he's a guy that really reminds me of a current Baylor player, actually, which is Lorando Johnson. Plays very physical, long arms, tall, kind of freaky physically. Athleticism-wise, though, not the fastest guy you're going to see out there. He's not a burner. He's not going to outrun a bunch of people in the 40 time. But when you watch him play, he makes up for it with that physicality and his ability to play press coverage, which is something that we saw from Lorando this year. And also Lorando's ability to get off of blocks and make tackles on the perimeter. That's something that Caden will bring to the table as well. I really like this pickup. Again, if you just watched him go out and go through speed drills or quickness drills, you might not come away extremely impressed. But when you watch him on the field, he's consistently making plays. And I think that length and that size is, again, something Baylor really, really needs on the perimeter. So this is going to end up being a very good pickup for the Bears. And he's a guy that, again, at Louisville, they made a deep run in the playoffs, had some really nice moments, blew out Allen in the first round. And so he's used to winning. And so he's a guy that I think will bring a nice winning mindset to this Baylor program.
So Caden Jenkins, the newest member of the Baylor recruiting class, or one of the newest members of the Baylor recruiting class, they're starting to just kind of keep trickling on in. And I don't know, eyeing the clock here, I'm not sure they're going to get their full class in, it looks like.
We'll just have to talk about them. Yeah.
We'll just kind of have to roll through, but sticking with the official guys here, Jarrell Boykins, another official signee in the books, defensive tackle. This was a recent addition for Baylor, just committed a couple days ago, as a matter of fact, but out of Hutchinson Community College. So they go the JUCO route. That's not something they do incredibly often, but that might be more of what they have to do, quite frankly, to fill some holes. So definitely looking to bulk up on the D-line. Big body, 300-plus pounder. Had offers from Arizona State, Matt Rule in Nebraska. Tulane pops up again, and there are others as well. But your thoughts on another addition up front from Jarrell Boykins?
Yeah, and he was a guy who Baylor actually looked at in high school but didn't end up offering and didn't end up recruiting heavily. But he was about 280 pounds at that point. 275, something around there. Now he's 322 pounds after spending 2 years in JUCO at Hutchinson Community College. They made a deep run into the national championship game, actually, and it ended up losing that game. But for him, he's got great size, a great base, and he was actually a shot put state champion at his high school. So the explosiveness is awesome to see. It's that rare blend of being absolutely massive, but also having this explosiveness to actually get into the backfield and maintain a strong, sturdy base. And that's what he's going to bring to the table. I think, he's one of those guys that I'm kind of intrigued by as far as, is he going to be more like a Bravion Roy, or is he going to be more like an Apuika as far as what's his penetration ability going to be like? Is he going to be able to get into the backfield and create havoc? I think the jury is still out on that. But what I know he's going to be able to do is stuff the run. Because he's absolutely just the size, the strength, the explosiveness. He's going to be able to maintain a good base, especially in the Big 12. So I really like him. I think he's going to be a guy that people are going to kind of forget about him in this signing class because it was so late, and then realize, oh, he's their starter at nose tackle. Oh, wait, now he's making a big impact year one at Baylor. I think he's going to be that kind of guy. I expect him to be the starter at nose tackle as long as Baylor continues using the nose tackle the way they have over the past few years.
So Jarrell Boykins, another member of the class, and has Klopfenstein come in officially yet? Thought he signed.
His graphic isn't up, but he actually had his signing day ceremony
a
few days ago. So
it's official. So
signed.
We can get to him at some point. That's our other interview that we will get to. So I say, here's what we'll do. We'll roll through these next three names and then him, and we'll get to his interview, and then we'll see what trickles in after that, and then get Travis, and we'll put a bow on this thing here in the next half hour or so, but kind of planning on the fly here. For those just joining us, been with you since 8 a.m., talked the Austin Novosad news right at the very beginning in depth, but have since moved on to the guys who are signing with Baylor. And a good number of double-digit names now have trickled in over the last couple of hours. So we'll hit these next 3 to 4 pretty hard quickly, and then get into our final interview before our final recorded interview before hitting the live with Travis here in just a few minutes. But Bryson Washington, I was talking about local ties and how it's kind of hit or miss as far as local guys go. It depends on what area you're looking at. With Temple, obviously, you lost Torian York, and we talked about that as well. But you did get Brendan Bett out of the Killeen area. And Franklin, quite frankly, another local guy here. Bryson Washington, a two-time state champ and a 4-star running back out of Franklin, Texas, offers from Arkansas, and U of H popping up again, TCU popping up again, Texas Tech popping up again, UTSA again, Iowa State, and more as well. But Bryson Washington, this is one that I know a lot of people are very excited about.
Yeah, and so I mentioned that Sean Tompkins was the number 1 rated recruit for me now that Austin Novosad has decommitted. Bryson is actually right there with him. He's probably my second highest rated prospect in this class at the moment. I went on record when Baylor, got him to commit. They flipped him from SMU after he committed to SMU a week earlier. He took his official visit, flipped to Baylor. I think of all the running backs in the state of Texas this year, he's the best fit, which makes him the best running back in the state of Texas for what Baylor needs. And if you look at his film, he's 6 foot, 205 pounds already. So he's already built really well to have the ability to maybe come in and play early. Great speed, great burst through the hole. But the biggest thing that he brings to the table is what Abram brought to the table. And that's that contact balance, that ability to take contact, but keep your feet moving, and whether it's maintain balance and keep running or carry guys forward for a few yards is something Baylor desperately needed this past season. That's what he brings to the table. He's also an early enrollee, so again, he's going to have an opportunity to make an impact right away because he'll be arriving in January. This is a fantastic prospect, and once again, he's my top-rated running back in the entire state of Texas for Baylor's wide zone scheme.
So how many early enrollees do we know of as of right now?
Yeah, so the early enrollees got shrunk a little bit because of Novosad, but we're up to 1, 2,
Thanks,
3,
Austin.
4, 5, 6. I have 7 listed right here. Jarrell Boykins will be an early enrollee, but that one obviously he just committed, so he'll be another one. That'll get him to 8. There might be 1 or 2 more that kind of maybe decided late that I haven't heard from, but the number right now is around 8. I don't think it'll get much higher than 10. And of course, the transfer prospects will also enroll early or try to enroll in January, like Campbell Barrington and Keytron Jackson.
Yeah, which we'll try to get around to those guys as well before we leave today. But Novosad, like I said, we talked about that earlier in the show. And it is what it is. Not going to cry over spilt milk, but definitely, a frustrating situation, no doubt about it. Saw an interview he did with, I think it was On 3, and he talked about the decision and said that the connection with Will Stein was, their new OC up there in Eugene, coming over from UTSA. That was the kicker, I think. And then just the fact that Oregon's, got some steam right now. It's a big program and, just an opportunity. There's a lot of Texas guys that are up there that he mentioned. So he's on record now about the decision, and the Will Stein factor did play a big role. So hit it off with Dan Lennon as well, and there you have it. But part of recruiting and definitely a sign of who's followed recruiting for a long time and who hasn't, based on some of the reactions I saw. I've never seen a flip on signing day before. It's definitely happened before. It's just painful when you go all in like Baylor did at that spot in particular, but it is what it is. So moving on along, Bryson Washington, a big get. Dawson Pendergrass, another name now officially in the books from Mineola, kind of in my old neck of the woods out in East Texas. But this was a guy who, I remember kind of when he first committed, people were like, who, huh, what? And then just kind of started figuring out he's a pretty good athlete, and that's what he's listed as, Grayson. Not really just a single spot necessarily in the cards for Dawson Pendergrass, but had offers from Texas Tech again, Arkansas again. Those two, UTSA and SMU, probably like the 4 schools there was most crossover with, you think?
Yeah.
In terms of offer
and
sheets?
Tech.
And Tech.
Yeah.
But yeah, had Tech, Arkansas, Indiana, UTSA, but chose the Bears quite a while ago, back in May of this year. So Dawson Pendergrass, your thoughts on the Mineola Texas product?
Yeah, let's quickly just do a little stat recap here. 7,414 yards rushing in 4 years. He averaged 9 yards per carry during his high school career, 89 rushing touchdowns. So that's just rushing wise. Receiving numbers, 1,187 yards and 16 more touchdowns. Oh, and he also threw for 7 touchdowns in his career as well. This guy's just a really good football player. He had to play both ways at Mineola, so he also played a lot of defense, tallied up over 160 tackles during his career. I think he's one of those guys who, you just get on campus and you figure it out. I think he could be a good running back, especially in Baylor's wide zone scheme. He had to play quarterback this year and basically was a wildcat quarterback for a lot of this season. But I think that's good for him because he definitely understands blocking schemes, and he definitely understands how important it is to hit the line of scrimmage very quickly and obviously with a lot of power. And so great height, great weight. I think he's a dude that really can be a great player at Baylor. And if it doesn't work at running back, that he could also play linebacker. And so there's another situation where we mentioned Torian York and Christian Brathwaite. Well, maybe Dawson Pendergrass ends up being that linebacker, that interior linebacker for this 2023 class. I could see that as well, but I'm really, really interested in seeing him start off at running back and seeing if he can do similar damage. Probably won't be similar to what he did in high school, but anything close to that would be absolutely tremendous during his time at Baylor.
So Dawson Pendergrass, coming out of East Texas, is one of the latest players to sign with the Bears. We got one more. Isaiah Robinson's now official, so you can chalk him up. So they're sitting at around 14 right now. Klopfenstein would give them about 15 or so, and we'll get to him. But first, we'll get to his interview. But first, DJ Coleman. That's the last one that we have not touched on that is now official. Safety out of Mesquite and Horn High School out there. Had offers from everybody from Alcorn State to Florida State. So kind of all over the map there. But another player in the defensive backfield, UTSA once again. Indiana out of the Big Ten, FSU, as I mentioned, and then just a scattering of other offers as well from HBCUs to Southland schools to, again, all points in between. So kind of a mixed bag, his offer list, but a lot of names. And DJ Coleman, what do you like about him?
Yeah, so he got an offer during the summer after a Baylor camp. He ran extremely well, and that was something very intriguing, obviously, because he's 6'1", 190 to put on tape, a 4.4 type speed is very impressive. So that straight line speed is definitely there. He doesn't have the most fluid hips. So I think it's going to be best to keep him closer to line of scrimmage, whether that's at star or boundary safety. I think he can fit in really nicely at either of those. Very strong athlete, like I mentioned, long, rangy, and very physical. And something that really stood out to me that not a lot of people are going to talk about is his impact on special teams. He blocked a lot of kicks this year and a lot of punts this season at Mesquite Horn. Really, really good player in that regard. So I could see him getting on the field extremely early as a special teams player. I don't think you'd want to burn his red shirt that route, but I think at least, if he red shirts his freshman year and then his red shirt freshman year, I could see him having a very nice impact on special teams if he's not a full-time player by then. I think he's a guy that's going to need some time to develop, but I really like what he can bring to the table, and he gives them another option at a safety position that they really need to address in this class.
So that is the class as it stands right now. Everybody that has signed, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then Klopfenstein. Is it Stein or Steen? Matthew Klopfenstein.
I think it's Stein.
Okay, so Matthew I just want to make sure
but
that
I don't know for sure. I
want to make sure I get that right. But he would make 15 out of the 21. It was 22 with Austin Novosad. But, of course, he flipped and signed with Oregon this morning, in case you hadn't heard. And so, yeah, it's 21 that they're looking at. although a couple of transfers that did come in as well, Campbell Barrington and Keytron Jackson. Do you just want to hit on that really quick before we hit this interview?
Yeah, we can talk about them really quick. This is a good time for it. Yeah, so I guess let's start with the first one, which was Campbell Barrington.
Offensive lineman coming over from BYU.
Right, so he looks to me like he's probably going to start off at tackle. I think it kind of makes a lot of sense that if you're going to take him, you're expecting him to play left tackle and come in and replace Connor Galvin. Great size. 6'5", right around there, 6'6", a little over 300 pounds, has been in the wide zone scheme before during his time at BYU, and of course, he got to know Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes a little bit as well. He took his mission trip right after he ended his high school career. He was in the 2017 class. So a very old guy, a guy that has a lot of experience, but also has that grown man strength because he's been in college for so long. And I think he's very athletic, very twitchy. I think Baylor fans are going to be really, really happy that the Bears were able to land him. And it really makes up for the loss of Calvin Clements because Barrington still has, I believe he's got 2 or 3 years. I think it's 2 years left. So he could be a fixture for them at the left tackle position. Massive get. They needed offensive linemen in this class. They got one with him. And then also something to keep note of, I guess I'll mention this right now, but his brother Clark has 1 more year of eligibility left. He entered the transfer portal a few days ago, and he would make a lot of sense for the Bears as well. He started over 40 games in his career at BYU, has only allowed 2 sacks during that time span. And he's a guy who would fit in probably at guard, but I could actually see them getting a little, maybe getting creative with him and potentially starting him at center if they were able to land him. Obviously, that's still going to take some work as he's an NFL draft prospect. But if they did get him, man, that would be huge if they could get both Barrington brothers and then whatever else they decide to do in the transfer portal along the offensive line. But he's a great starting point.
All right, and one last little burst of oxygen before we take a little bit of a break and head into listening to Matthew Klopfenstein talk about his signing with Baylor. But Keytron Jackson, that came down yesterday. This team needs wide receivers badly. I mean, last year it was just a mixed bag. In hindsight, R.J. Sneed would have helped a lot, and he went off to Colorado. You don't think so at all?
No.
Just having some experience. Well, I feel like
don't think he would have played. Like who are you? Maybe what we
doesn't
know
matter.
now. Maybe it doesn't.
It
He couldn't
really
even
doesn't
play
matter.
Colorado.
Yeah,
so.
but I'm just saying, like, just having some veterans at wide receiver, I think would have helped, and just because you had a lot of just guys figuring it out. I felt like, and so I just feel like that guy who's played 3-4 years and just kind of knows the deal, just rubbing off a little bit. You know what I mean? Not that he would have been like a 1,000-yard receiver. I'm not indicating or implying that, but just a bit proven compared to that room last year that was anything but proven. I mean, a lot of young guys. So Keytron Jackson, not like he's some old grizzled veteran already at this point, but he has played a bit. He comes over from Arkansas as of yesterday. So what do you like about what that addition means and what that does to that room?
Yeah, this is a game-changing type pickup for Baylor at the wide receiver position. He's about 6'2", 205 pounds, maybe a hair over 6'2", but elite prospect coming out of high school, high 4-star type guy, top 165 prospect in the entire country. Baylor recruited him pretty hard out of high school with Joey McGuire. Weren't able to land him ultimately, so he ended up in Fayetteville. But 2 years now, he's been in Arkansas, has had okay production, but next season was really the point where he was going to be their wide receiver 1 after they lost Jaden Hazelwood this past season. He was expected to be a 1,000-yard receiver for them, be their guy next year. He ends up entering the transfer portal, and now he's at Baylor. High-level prospect. Great ability on the outside to create separation against press coverage, which is something that Baylor desperately needs. He's great across the middle of the field as well with sure hands. He's also a good yak guy, yards after catch, which, again, outside of Monterey Baldwin, they didn't really have that guy this past season. This is one of those guys who I think can absolutely change their offensive philosophy in a year. And as those young guys grow up, Hal Presley and Javon Gibson and Monterey Baldwin taking another step, if you throw this guy in there, I just think he makes their receiving core much, much more dangerous and intriguing. This is a huge one for the Bears.
So 2 players now through the transfer portal, and there will be more. No doubt about that. They're not stopping at just a couple of guys, but there were some positive additions where there hasn't been a lot of incoming good news, it feels like, but there have been some bits, and that was definitely the case with those 2 transfer announcements. And so that brings us to right now where you've got a couple of those transfers incoming. There will be more, obviously. But right now, 15 of the high school prospects, or I guess 14 high school prospects, 1 JUCO prospect, have all officially signed with Baylor at this point. And one of those guys is at a spot where they are, really in revamp mode. I mean, we talked about it earlier with Ben Sims now out of the equation at tight end, and you don't know exactly what Drake Dabney's status is going to be heading into next year. And you got some young tight ends, but they really went heavy in this class. And for one of those guys in particular, they went out of state to Arizona. I noticed, too, when Kenny Dillingham took over, like they were starting to be a little Arizona State love there. Had an offer from ASU, offer from Cal out of the Pac-12 as well. But signing with Baylor, big Arizona tight end Matthew Klopfenstein, and he talked to Grayson earlier this week.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to the SicEm 365 Signing Day show. And I welcome a great guest, a Baylor signee, Matthew Klopfenstein out of Horizon High School in Arizona. Matt, I know I'm sure you're really excited for this moment, right? What's this like for you?
It's huge. It's a moment I've been kind of looking forward to ever since I was little. And so it's a blessing. And so, just kind of finally putting that pen on paper, it's just a so surreal moment. And so, I'm grateful for every opportunity. And it's a blessing.
What has that kind of meant for your parents too?
It means a lot, just showing them how hard I work for it and showing them that goal that I wanted to meet and ultimately meeting that goal. It's just been so good, and hearing and feeling the support from them. And it's just been kind of like a team. It's been like a team bond throughout this whole thing. So it's been good.
That's great, man. So I kind of want to go back a little bit in your recruitment because you kind of had a little bit of an interesting recruitment in the fact that Baylor was kind of a later offer for you. So your first offer was from Arizona back in February of 2021. What was it like for you to get that first offer and kind of know that you're going to be a D1 athlete at some point?
Yeah, it was actually, it's a funny story how I got my first offer from Arizona. Is my coach called me in the middle of a test, an online test at home, and he told me Arizona was going to offer me. And I remember I freaked out. I remember I failed the test. It was bad. But I do remember just being like, wow. And then I remember sitting down afterwards and being like, this is something I could do. Like, I could do this. Like, if I work hard, I could potentially make this thing big. And so I just worked at it, worked on my craft. And that offseason was a really good offseason for me with like sevens, playing on the Arizona Dolphins and just working hard in the weight room and then killing it and having a good junior year.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the home state offer too. I mean, was that kind of cool also?
It was. I grew up an ASU fan. My dad, my uncles and stuff right there. And so there's a little bit of family rivalry when I ended up getting offered by them. But it was so cool. It was just a blessing. I was super happy.
That's great. And then from that point on, the offers kind of just kept coming in till about March of 2022, which is also around the time you got your 4th star. You ended up with 24 offers. Did you think that all of that would be possible? Just all those offers, the 4-star rating, just kind of all of those things?
Yeah, it didn't really feel real at all. Like, if you would ask me that sophomore offseason going into junior year, I would have been like, you're crazy. But, I put up good numbers junior year and I played really well, worked hard, and I was ultimately really happy with how I played junior year. And so, honestly, I didn't really think too much about how the offseason would go after junior year, but it just took off. And so I was just kind of in the boat, just going down the stream, just wherever God led me, and so it was awesome.
So that Baylor offer came February 4th. So I guess just first initial thoughts, just when you got the Baylor offer, what was going through your mind, and was it kind of a random offer for you?
It was a little bit, but there's a funny story about that. Is I believe I got offered from, I don't know, I got offered from I think it might have been Louisville or something. And me and my dad were talking afterwards. And my dad was like, you know, it'd be such a good school to get to know the coaches from. I was like, who? And he's like, Baylor. And I was like, you're right. And then next thing you know, a week later, right before they went into their quiet period, they offered me. And it was just such a surreal moment. It was such a good moment. And like, I remember I looked at Dad and I was like, wow. I was like, it's like meant to be. And so we were obviously super attracted to Baylor because they're a Christian school, and me growing up in a Christian family, it's been huge, and it's obviously a plus for us. And so, but yeah, it was a crazy moment, and I loved it.
Yeah. And then you ended up taking a visit, I guess, like a month and a half later in March. And I think I remember talking to you, and that late March visit really solidified things for you, right? What about that trip just was perfect for you?
It was the people. It was the people, the coaches. It was like, I told my mom this in the airport headed home. I was like, all the coaches, it was like I was talking to my uncle. Like, it was just it was like family from the start. And like, we just got along so well. And, you know, they play great football over there. How they use the tight end. It just all signs were pointing towards Baylor. And it was something I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah. And you committed in April. So it was like really quickly after that. You know, I guess it's one of those things. So you live in Arizona. I mean, was it hard for you to kind of decide to go to school in Texas, or did you always kind of see yourself going away from home?
No, I'm the oldest of 6, and so family's always been a very big thing to me. I love family with all my heart, but I always told myself I'd be willing to move. And I'm actually moving towards family. I have family in Dallas and San Antonio, and so I'm going to be going up there during the weekends and hanging out with them. I got cousins and stuff, and so I'm moving away from, you know, close family, but I'm also moving towards family. And so that's what I'm grateful for. It'd be a little different if I was moving to like Minnesota or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just, you know, and I'm always going to come back and stuff, but yeah, it was a hard decision, but I feel like it's right.
Right. And then you took your official visit in June. Was there something from that trip that was maybe unique that you didn't get to see on your unofficial that really, you know, stood out to you and just kind of made you go, yeah, this is why I chose Baylor?
I remember we got some more one-on-one time with Coach Miranda for a good 30, 40 minutes. I remember it was just so good. He made it so personal when we were talking about him. He just told us about his story and the way he viewed things. And it was such a clear moment for me and my parents. And we really just realized, like, this is where we want to be. And yeah, it was just so good. And I met Trey Wilson from Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're going to be rooming. We're like best buds now. We talk all the time. But yeah, it was a good trip. I loved it. Yeah.
What about Aranda kind of has, you know, stood out to you? I know a lot of people call him quiet and stuff, but I know most of the things he says are very intentional and meaningful. Does that stand out to you?
Totally. He's got a very calm demeanor. And so I love that about him. Person over player. He talks about that all the time. Just the culture that he's building at. I've told my mom this. I said, I feel like Baylor's the right one because the culture that they're building over there is pretty much how I was being raised. Like the tied in with the Christian religion and everything like that. And just the way I was raised, I feel like it was just a perfect fit. And I'm just transitioning. And it was like, it's an easy transition for me.
Right. And so your position coach is actually also the offense coordinator in Jeff Grimes. What's your relationship like with Jeff Grimes? And, you know, what do you think about him?
I love him. He's the best. We talk all the time. We make jokes with each other. It's fun. We got a great relationship. Yeah. And him and Coach Bolfing, we just chatted up. It's the best. Yeah, I love those guys.
Yeah, and they brought in, you know, Jeff brought in that wide zone scheme, the RVO style. They ask a lot of their tight ends. How do you see yourself kind of fitting into that offensive scheme?
I just see myself getting in there and working, and just wherever Coach wants to put me, I'm willing to play. You know, if I don't play, I'll cheer on the guys. And so I'm just looking forward to getting on the field, and if that's what Coach has for me. And I'm just looking forward to getting there and just start grinding.
So I think probably 3 years ago, Baylor might not have been, you know, very interesting to you at all as far as their use of the tight ends. But when Jeff Grimes got to Baylor, you know, Ben Sims had a couple good years, Drake Dabney, you know, playing really well. What have you seen from those tight ends and how they're utilizing the offense that you like?
I love it. I just love it. Like coaches literally like I forget which game it was, but they handed the ball off to the tight end who scored to Sims. I remember right after the game, I texted him. I was like, "Good job, coach! Like, you know, good win." I was watching, and then he texted me. He goes, "Did you see that run?" It was just a funny thing that he has. And so, I love how they use tight ends. I love it. I just been watching, literally when I watch the games, I watch the tight ends. That's what I love about it. Coach Grimes has them doing all kinds of things. And so it's an offense I want to play in for sure.
Yeah, I think that was Ben Sims versus BYU, right?
Yeah, I believe it was BYU. Yeah, it's Coach Grimes' modern, I believe, where we coached that before.
Right. That's awesome. So I know this year, I guess you mentioned 7-on-7. So let's start there first, because you got to meet Hawkins, Poly, and Austin Novosad there. Obviously, also on your official visit, you got to meet a lot of the guys. But what was it like, just that interaction at a 7-on-7 event with those two guys who were committed to Baylor also?
It was crazy. I remember I saw on Hawkins' story, on his Snapchat story, that he was coming to Phoenix, and I was like, no way. I was like, is he really going to play in this tournament? And he's like, yeah. So I hit him up. I was like, bro, let's meet. And then we got in a group chat with Austin, and we all met up, and it was so good because I've been committed for months, and then to go and not see a single to see a single commit, it was so good. And so I met them both, and I was like, let's go. And so it was a good feeling.
That's great. And I know this past year, I did want to ask you, because over the last 2 seasons, you have 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, 87 catches. How would you describe your game? I know you do a lot in the receiving game, but you also, have to block as well. But how have you seen your game kind of improve, and what are some of the things that you feel like you bring to the table?
I can tell you one thing is I bring hard work and a passion to win. That's honestly what I bring. And I'm a lovable guy, and so I'm not tearing anyone down or anything. So, or at least I'd like to think I'm a lovable guy. But I bring hard work to the table for sure. And one thing I got better at definitely this past season was blocking. I've always been a decent blocker, but I've really been working on Coach Litton, our head coach. He's been helping me, with hand positioning and running the feet and using your hips, and so it's just been good. I've been seeing improvement in my blocking game. But yeah, I'm playing special teams, playing defensive end, and just doing it all for the team, trying to help us win. And so, yeah, I love it. It was a good season.
Awesome, man. So if there was one thing that you would want to say to Baylor Nation on signing day, what would that be?
Just know that I'm coming, and I'm going to hit the ground running as soon as I get on campus, and we're going to win some championships.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. And congratulations again on signing with Baylor today. Really exciting moment. So congrats on that.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
So there you go. There is a Baylor tight end signee, Matthew Klopfenstein, and the Bears now with, what did I say a few minutes ago, 15, I believe their 21 potential signees now locked down. And so we're going to have Travis Roeder here in just a second to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this class. But let's get into who has not signed just yet, Grayson. And I think we're looking at, for starters, let's see here, Jaron Woods, Tayshawn Wilson, another one, Micah Gifford, Corey Kelly. Who am I missing
Trey
here?
Wilson.
And Trey Wilson.
Yeah, those are the ones left. But let's talk about Klopfenstein, though, because we didn't talk about him before his segment. And the reason we got to talk about him is because, again, now that things have kind of shifted, Klopfenstein is a top 5 prospect for me in this class. And big reason for it is production, and a big reason for it is just his film. I mean, he's a really, really good football player, very talented. He creates separation, which is not something that you see very often from the tight end position. He also is very good at contested catches, as you're seeing right there. Good across the middle of the field, but even better as a field stretcher and a red zone threat. And he's a guy I have as a 4-star prospect, and he's right around that nationally as well. Just a guy that I think can be a true difference maker in this offense at the tight end position, and kind of gives them something that's more of a prototypical BYU tight end, kind of like what they had with Jeff Grimes when he was there, and some of the guys that they have on the current roster. But yeah, Matthew Klopfenstein, very good player, and an early enrollee, a guy that I think could make an impact awfully early in his career. I think he could play as a true freshman, honestly, even though they have some depth coming back. I think he brings a unique blend of size and speed and the ability to make plays over the top of the defense.
So there is the newest tight end signee for the Bears coming out of the state of Arizona. So held on to him for quite a while, and that'll be a position that they reload more so than reboot or redo in so many ways. You lose Ben Sims, but you like the young pieces that you have, and he's part of those young pieces that you do have now. Getting ready to to reload that room. So curious and interested to see how quickly he can make an impact. So trying to keep tabs and kind of going off lists and whatnot right here. We got a handful of guys that have not signed yet, so let's just run these down and get into just kind of a summary here, since we're not going to be able to fit all these guys in without talking all day long, which we're not going to do. So Tayshawn Wilson, Micah Gifford. How do you want to do this here?
Let's start with Tayshawn.
All right, Tayshawn Wilson.
Yeah, so Tayshawn is an intriguing prospect to me. So he's a 4-star, pretty much consensus. He's right around a 4-star for me as well, high 3-star type. But the thing that I think is probably the biggest compliment to him, and I honestly believe this, if he was 6'1", I think he'd be the best cornerback in the state of Texas. And I don't think that's a bullish statement. His speed, his athleticism, great vertical, great explosiveness vertically, great explosiveness attacking the football. He high points the ball really well, makes an impact on special teams. He really just is a playmaker at the cornerback position. He's also a guy that you could possibly see in this defense as things kind of move forward. Could he be like a Graylin Arnold where he eventually plays field safety in this defense? I don't know the exact answer to that yet. I haven't really seen Baylor be willing to play a guy that small on the back end of the defense, but who knows? Maybe he's able to do that. But I think in general, Baylor's getting a really good football player who's a great athlete. And I think that's so important for this defense. And he's going to be a guy that I think Dave Aranda is going to figure out a way to utilize him to the best of his abilities. And I think he could be a very, very good player for this Baylor team. And he had pretty good offers too. He had a Texas offer, SMU offer, and then like Marshall and Houston. So some smaller offers outside of that.
And I know I'm kind of throwing you curveballs here, Jake, because I don't have these in order. But Micah Gifford, the next guy that we will go to. And Micah Gifford, was a pretty early on commit from what I remember. I definitely saw him play this year at Pflugerville Weiss as they
in February.
Yeah, they played Midway and beat Midway. So got to see him play a little bit and liked what I did see. Didn't have like a monster game, but he had some big catches in that one. So wide receiver out of Pflugerville Weiss.
Yeah, and the only wide receiver in this class. So I know there was a lot of thought early on when he committed that, maybe he could switch to defense and play field safety or something along those lines. I never really bought into that, but I would also say since he's the only receiver in this class, I just don't see that as being a possibility. And this past year, he had a really good year. He showed some glimpses of kind of what he could be at Baylor. He also showed that during his junior season. Great long speed, but the thing that really stands out to me is just that acceleration, that ability to get by the secondary and get by safeties and cornerbacks. Just, again, great long speed and a guy that's going to have to continue working on his craft. I don't think he's going to be a starter day one by any means. I think he's going to redshirt his first year. It may take him another year after that to really develop into a full-time starter. But in general, a great gift for this class. He's 6'3", 185 pounds. He's shown the ability to make contested catches and has shown the ability to make catches over the middle of the field, which I think is really important for high school prospects and something that a lot of Baylor receivers in the past didn't really bring to the table that I think he does. He's not a one-trick pony by any means. He can make a lot of different plays and also shows an ability after the catch as well.
All right, so rifling through a couple more, and then we will take a very short break, and then we'll come back with Travis Roeder to put some finishing touches on just his thoughts on the class that has signed so far. Corey Kelly is where we'll go next, Jacob, a linebacker out of League City, Texas, and Clear Falls High School had offers from, there's Houston again, but a lot of interesting places. There's Texas Tech again, there's UTSA again, but there's also Utah, and you got Memphis and Indiana, Boston College, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt once again. So your thoughts on Corey Kelly, another linebacker prospect?
Yeah, and he's one that actually Travis and I have had conversations about. So we'll talk about him a little bit when Travis comes up here as well. But I think Corey Kelly is a freak. When I watch him play, the explosiveness, the athleticism, it's like everything you could possibly want out of a defensive prospect. He's being recruited as a jack. I think he's going to stick at that jack position just because he can do it all. He can drop into coverage. He can rush the passer. He's got a motor to him that I really like as well. And he's an elite athlete, very good basketball player, pretty much averages a double-double for that Clear Falls basketball team. I just think that the athleticism, everything you want is there, and he's shown it on film as well. The sacks, the tackles for losses, the forced fumbles. He's a guy that if you put him in the right position to succeed, he's going to make a lot of plays, and he's going to make Dave Aranda and this defense very, very happy. This is a great get for Caleb Collins in that jack room. I think he's going to bring another level of athleticism to a position that I already feel like has a ton of athletes in it in this Baylor program.
So, Corey Kelly, 3-star linebacker out of League City, one of the latest signees, and one of the non-signees. There we go. As we bring you the latest as soon as guys are signing, but he is one of those that has not signed yet. And just big picture, I guess Trey Wilson would be the one that you're eyeing if you were eyeing anybody that could possibly do something wonky today. But you're not expecting that. And he also put out a graphic, I think, or there's a graphic floating with Baylor all over the place. So that's not expected.
TCU recently, which is the only reason that you would have concerns. But I still expect Baylor to hold on to him. So I guess we can go ahead and talk about him. He's an early enrollee, which makes it even more important that they're able to sign him. He's a guy who I think, if you watch his film, he seems like a guy who's probably the most ready to play early on the defensive line. I think for me, it's probably him or DK Kalu as the prime candidates. Outside Jarrell Boykins, of course, he's going to play right away. But Trey showed some really good things this year during his senior film. And junior year, I felt like he was a really good player, but it felt like he was always one step away from making a big-time player, one step away from, reading the game appropriately. And then this senior year, I just felt like he took a big step in the right direction. And the physicality is there, the strength is there. And he's just a guy who I feel like has a very high floor, but also I think there is an untapped ceiling there. And the reason I say that is when a guy progresses so much from junior to senior year, that usually means some really good things going forward and kind of their production curve. And so, Trey's a big-time prospect, one they need to figure out a way to hold on to. Really good offer list as well when you look at, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi State, USC, Utah, Nebraska, Miami, Florida State. I mean, this is a really, really good prospect and kind of that high 3-star, low 4-star type range for Trey Wilson.
All right, so nearly here at the end, just 2 more names to go. Again, these are the handful of guys who have not signed just yet.
Woods just signed. Jaron Woods.
Okay,
they just released.
So there's, I believe that's, 16 or 17 now that are official. Let's pop up Jaron Woods. He is now official, and then we'll get to the last unsigned signee to be. But Jaron Woods, a defensive end out of LaGrange. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, so he sustained just a brutal injury to start his senior year, or else he might be my highest rated defensive lineman. I absolutely loved everything I saw from him his junior year, but also more than that, his frame is just ridiculous. Long arms, 6'5", 280 pounds already. Again, didn't get to play his senior year because he had a leg injury the first game of the season. But a great offer list, Texas Tech, Vanderbilt, Auburn, Cal. And for me, he's one of those guys that when I look at their defensive line group that they've signed this year, he is the highest ceiling of all of them, but he also has the lowest floor. And so because of that, it's kind of one of those hit or miss type prospects. I lean more towards the hit portion as long as he's able to recover fully from his injury. But really like what they're getting from Jaron Woods and a guy that I think has that typical NFL type frame. Reminds me a lot of Gabe Hall in that regard.
So I'm sitting here monitoring Dave Aranda's now doing his Armed Forces Bowl stuff, like little media obligation ahead of tomorrow night's game. And he did announce that Siaki Ika and cornerback Mark Milton will not play tomorrow night versus Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl. So Apu Ika probably has played his last game in a Baylor uniform. Mark Milton played his last game in a Baylor uniform as well. Both those guys now out for the Armed Forces Bowl, but everybody else expected to be available. But obviously, Apu against a team that runs the football like Air Force does.
Yeah, that's a significant loss.
That's pretty freaking significant. So elsewhere, I guess he also apparently said, you lost Novosad. I don't know if they addressed that directly or not, but he's basically just saying they're celebrating today, and that's what we've tried to do ever since we ranted for about 15 minutes at the very beginning, 2.5 hours ago. We've been focused on going through this entire class, which we've been doing, and that's all you can do, man. You can't put the genie back in the bottle and wake up tomorrow and you suddenly have your 4-star quarterback again. So got to move on and deal with it as best you can. That appears to be what Dave Aranda is doing. So final signee, then we'll take a break, a very short one, and come back with Travis Roeder. And this one, the final unofficial signee, right? The final name that has not quite signed just yet, and that would be Trent Thomas. Trent Thomas, the last name to talk about here, defensive end, another defensive lineman out of Missouri City, Texas, Fort Bend Marshall High School. And stop me if you've heard this before, Boston College offer and Houston offer and let's see here, UTSA offer, SMU offer, a lot of familiar names there. Also at San Diego State, Colorado as well, Boston College. I think I said that a couple times now, but let's close it on out here with Trent Thomas, defensive end out of Missouri City.
Yeah, when he initially committed, very, very excited about this. 6'5", 237 pounds, freakishly long arms, just the longest arms, I think, in the class. I mean, he's built like a guy that's going to put on a lot of weight and be an absolute problem during his career at Baylor. But he's got a very, very low floor. I just think this year he didn't have an amazing year. It was one of those where I was expecting even more from him. That didn't quite happen. But the ceiling is there for him to become a really, really good football player for Baylor. And he's a guy who I just think needs more reps. I think he's going to come in very raw during his time at Baylor. And it's going to kind of come down to how well does he develop. And if he can develop and actually hit that big ceiling that we're talking about, he could be a very, very high impact player for this Baylor team. Or if his floor hits and they're unable to develop him, then it's going to be difficult for him to, I think, find playing time during his time at Baylor. So it's kind of that mixed bag for Trent Thomas. But in general, again, everything is there for him to be really good. And this is kind of one of those prospects that's like a ball of clay that Dave Aranda and this staff are going to have to figure out a way to continue to develop him and turn him into a potential all-conference player. Because I do think that's in the cards for Trent Thomas if everything hits. But, other things are in the cards as well if things don't end up working out for him. He's got a long way to go, and I don't expect him to be a key contributor for Baylor until probably his third year on campus.
All right, so there you go. There's the entire class for Baylor in 2023. Even talked about a couple of the transfers that have also joined on the O-line and also in that wide receiver room with Keytron Jackson just yesterday. So we have been talking outside of a couple of interviews since 8 a.m. this morning. We are going to take our one and only small little commercial break here. And when we return, we'll close out the show by talking with Travis Roeder, one of our SicEm 365 analysts. We'll talk Austin Novosad's departure from the class and flip this morning to Oregon and what that means as far as the quarterback spot goes. But we'll also dip into some other names that signed today and what that means for this Bears team moving forward. So stay tuned. Coming back, one big final segment, Travis Roeder. This is the National Signing Day show on SicEm 365 Sports.
In our logo and advertising, we say we are people that you can count on. What does that mean? It starts with providing a quality vehicle and quality service at a fair price. But it also means we do what we say we will do, and we treat people fairly with respect. It starts by hiring great people, good local folks who work hard with a caring attitude. Our employees are the real reason we are people that you can count on. Put us to the test and see for yourself that at Richard Carr Motors, we are people you can count on.
Texas Farm Bureau Insurance has protected fellow Texans with auto, home, health, and life insurance since 1952. With more than 260,000 square miles of land and 27 million people, that's a lot to cover. Whether you're wrangling cattle or wrangling kids, we're proud to protect Texans in all Texan ways of life.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
You want to know why Stonewood Dental is so successful? Listen to what happy customers have to say.
It's pleasant. It's different than any other dentist's office. I really feel like they care. And it's not that you're here for 2 hours waiting on someone to take care of you. It's quick and easy, and I bring my kids, and my kids love being here too. They really love the treasure box. Staff is really nice and accommodating, real friendly. You feel more like home. It's not sterile looking. Everybody has their own personalized rooms with decorations and decor, and they'll even have a blanket for you when it's cold. I've recommended people to actually come here, and they are patients now. I really love it here. It feels like family.
Learn more, stonewood-dental.com.
Baylor Scott and White, Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, hand or wrist injuries, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trusts. Baylor Scott and White, Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. SicEm Bears.
How did Edward Jones become one of the biggest financial service companies in the world? By not acting that way. Financial strategies, one-on-one advice, it's a big difference. And that's why Brad Wilson, your Edward Jones financial advisor, makes sense of investing. Experience the difference for yourself. Brad Wilson, 250 Sharon Drive in Woodway, 254-776-4337. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Three Nations Brewing Company has 16 different beers on draft with a new beer every Friday. It also offers 2 air-conditioned tap rooms, a large indoor beer hall, a second-floor mezzanine offering a great overview of the brewing company and equipment, and patio where you can relax under the shade. Plus, you can now experience the new Three Nations Beer Garden Grill on our shaded patio. Grab a cold beer and enjoy a bite from our freshly prepared and delicious menu. Street tacos, quesadillas, freshly cooked burgers and dogs, and veggie burgers too. Nachos and so much more, all prepared and cooked on site. So come visit the award-winning Three Nations Brewing Company on East Vandergrift off I-35 in Carrollton.
All right, welcome back into the SicEm365.com 365 Sports National Signing Day show. We've been with you since 8 a.m., taking a look one by one over Baylor's recruiting class, and also talking a bit about, one member that's not a part of this recruiting class, but also talking about, the fact that we just learned Siaki Ika and Mark Milton will not play in tomorrow night's Armed Forces Bowl. And there's a lot going on. And there's going to be even more once tomorrow night's game wraps up, fellas, because there are some coaches to be hired. There are some transfer portal guys to go after. Travis Roeder now joins us here on set, SicEm365.com analyst with myself and Grayson Grundhafer. And Travis, there's a boatload of things going on, a ton of things going on, a ton of things for all of us to talk and write about. And so we could go another 2.5 hours, but for all of our sakes, let's just dive right in. The big topic, in terms of this class and next year, let's go ahead and get the bad out of the way first, was the Austin Novosad news. His flip to Oregon, made official this morning, been committed for the longest of times, fended off A&M, fended off, who else am I?
Notre Dame,
Ohio State. They were the main ones, and then TCU here, especially recently. But in the end, Oregon flips him. So this is big, obviously. Crown jewel of the class, some would say. But your thoughts on Novosad's loss, what that means as far as the depth goes, and the focus now, and kind of how all that adds up.
It obviously is, it's painful. I don't think there's really any two ways about it. I think everything y'all said earlier in the show is pretty apt on it. The only thing I would add is, Grayson, I'll let you speak on, as far as if we want to get into how they handled not taking a quarterback last year. But that was definitely part of the calculation in the sense of I know the coaching staff was all in on Austin. They kind of saw him being that 5-star level quarterback before everyone else did. And they said, look, we've identified this guy. We think if we go all in on him, show him that we know how good he is before everybody else, before the Ohio States, before the Notre Dames come jumping in at the last minute, before Texas A&M, who he was like their 8th option or whatever, tried to go after him. Baylor identified him as the leader first, and kind of, they pushed their chips to the table and said, we think we can make this happen. And I mentioned to Grayson off air before this that I think what's particularly difficult about this is that, when you're making that calculation, maybe you're figuring, okay, well, if we don't get Austin, maybe it'll be because he commits somewhere else back in June. Not that he flips on, the night or morning of signing day, because that really has put Baylor in a bind here. As far as, they didn't go after any other quarterbacks. So, I mentioned how Baylor's lost Zeno, they've lost Drones, they've lost Gary now in the portal. They've seen the negative aspects of the portal. It's time for Baylor to reap the positive side of the portal, because Baylor needs another scholarship quarterback before they go into spring ball. You can't have Blake taking every rep, and you can't have a backup being with the twos behind him, a non-scholarship guy. And they probably need to add 2 quarterbacks before we get to the fall. You really want 3 guys who can play. Sometimes, like this last year, we had Luke Anthony as a guy who was a non-scholarship guy, but, you felt comfortable with him taking reps. He's not going to be around. But you need 3 quarterbacks going into a season, which means they're probably going to need to take 2 guys, whether one of those is a high school guy or not. Whether that ends up being a high school guy or not, but regardless, I think 2 scholarship quarterbacks are coming to Baylor soon. It's just a matter of how they make that timing happen. And as you said, Craig, new defensive coordinator coming in, new special teams, safeties coach. I think, there's always going to be some turnover as far as like recruiting staff, like the machinations of how college football works. Like this next month is going to be crazy.
And I said earlier too, like as soon as tomorrow's game wraps up,
oh yeah,
the roster.
What game? We have a game tomorrow.
Yeah. There's also a bowl game, and you're going to finish either 7-6 or 6-7. And I think 7-6 would be way, way better than finishing 6-7. They could really use a win, but then after that, it's like, all right, who else is jumping into the portal now that the bowl game's wrapped up? And it looks like Apu's probably going to declare at any moment for the draft or in the next coming days. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts.
There are. I think Travis, I want to get your thoughts on this because I don't want to go down the Austin Novosad rabbit hole for too long. I think it's really important that, yes, while there is some negative momentum from that, I think really quickly I want you to hit on the positive momentum of them adding Campbell Barrington and Keytron Jackson, 2 pickups that are frankly getting overshadowed because of this bad news. And I know a lot of people are talking about how Baylor's not being as successful as TCU in the portal or, blah, blah, blah. Baylor really is doing some really good things in the portal. Can you kind of talk about those 2 additions specifically, as I believe both of those will be signing during this early signing period?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate how, on the 365 board as people, as TCU has been really successful, I think, in the transfer portal. I don't think there's any point ignoring that. And so for Baylor to be successful, we don't need to pretend that TCU isn't having some great additions as well. Right. It's really just about what Baylor can do to, stay on that level and get where they need to go. And I think, as you mentioned, those 2 recent additions, Campbell Barrington, adding a guy with college left tackle experience, not only is experienced, but really good. That is the positive aspect of the transfer portal. That's something that just basically never used to happen. So that's a big linchpin for them. And then Keytron Jackson, I mean, Grayson, you and I were just talking about him before we came on air. I think he's getting lost in the shuffle. When you watch him, playing, I'm blanking on Arkansas's quarterback's name right now.
KJ Jefferson.
Yeah, KJ Jefferson, obviously not a pocket passer, not a guy who's great at throwing touch balls down the sideline or anything like that. So the stats weren't amazing for Keytron, but you watch him, I think he was a state champion long jumper. And if you think about the physical skills required in long jump, which is that explosion, you see him just blowing by cornerbacks on the sideline. He's got tremendous acceleration, especially in that kind of 2 to 10 yard range. So I think he's a guy where all year, Baylor went to Provo and could not beat press coverage from bad BYU corners. I think that was something that Baylor struggled with all year, was that teams basically, even if they weren't a press corner team, they would press Baylor's wide receivers because they would just make the bet that they couldn't beat them. So I think Keytron gives them a guy that you come in day one, say, he can beat press coverage, he can be a big target down the sideline. So those 2, I think, are 2 really big additions.
Yeah, I did want to mention, I also think that that's actually Blake Shapen's best attribute is the balls down the sideline.
Yeah.
And so getting a guy like that, I think it's very important that we mention that, because also you'll see development from some other guys as well, Hal Presley and guys like that. They're going to look to add probably another transfer wide receiver, but I do want to get your thoughts on the wide receiver in this class.
Yeah.
Micah Gifford, another long rangey wide receiver, good vertical threat, put up good numbers there at Pflugerville Weiss. What are your thoughts on Micah Gifford?
Yeah, just real quick, one final thought on Keytron. I think it's really important that he's really the first big-time transfer guy they've gotten that didn't have an LSU or a BYU connection, which I think demonstrates that was a concern that I've had. You know, Apu was never a guy that Baylor was going to get without that LSU connection, I don't think. So for them to just straight up go get a guy that a lot of other teams wanted, that was really talented and they didn't really have a prior connection to, that kind of speaks value that guys like Dallas Baker and stuff can get that done. As to Micah Gifford, he's the only wide receiver in this class. You and I have seen him up in person catching balls from a certain quarterback at Baylor camp. I think he's just a really good all-around outside receiver. What I really look for in outside receivers are guys who know how to sink their hips in their routes, because those are the guys that can win on deep comebacks, the digs, the posts, all those kind of routes where you're one-on-one with a corner at the top of your route stem, and how quickly you can get in and out of that break kind of determines whether you can get open. He's that guy. I have heard that he has small hands, and sometimes guys who have small hands have trouble with drops. That wasn't the case with Tyquan Thornton, who literally has absolute tiny baby hands, but was somehow amazing at catching balls. So that's just something to watch for Gifford to see. I didn't see any problems with drops at camp. But if he ever does have problems with drops, he played some safety in high school and looks really good on that back end. So I think he's a guy where you feel really good about him at outside receiver. If hands are an issue, he can become a great defensive back prospect. But for a one wide receiver prospect in this class, I think he's really good.
For what it's worth, Campbell Barrington now official. The BYU transfer offensive lineman has signed his, national letter of intent, NIL, NLI, all that jazz. But yeah, he's officially now gone from transfer portal to officially signed with Baylor. So big offensive line addition there for Campbell Barrington out of BYU. And you're right. And like the things with the LSU and the BYU connections, like those are going to run out here in the next year. I mean, they've been gone long enough now that those guys they recruited are not even going to be around.
And I forgot about Jackson Player being involved here, but that was a Waco connection too. Yeah. So all of these guys they've taken previously had very kind of obvious connections. So to just straight up go grab a guy who's talented, that speaks well for the future.
All right, so looking at this class, I was curious of what you think, other than quarterback, obviously, is missing. You know, you got the athlete in Dawson Pendergrass that you figured start at running back and then kind of go from there. But you got 3 corners, 4 DBs overall, counting LeVar Thornton, 3 defensive ends, 3 defensive tackles, 1 linebacker, 3 O-linemen, a punter, a running back. I guess it's 5 defensive backs, actually. My apologies, because DJ Coleman at safety. 2 tight ends, and then the receiver and Micah Gifford. So kind of just all over the place. Obviously, big focus on the lines and the secondary, because that's where they're by far going to be the most replacements. So what are you kind of eyeing as far as the numbers and the positions and where you're eyeing, I guess, the next possible moves?
Well, I mean, I think the total numbers used to be a lot more important in the pre-portal area. You really wanted to kind of stack up classes, take a quarterback every class, take 2 linebackers every class. So that lessens that importance. But obviously with Baylor losing their 2 inside linebacker commits over the past few months, I was never really a big fan of Torian York, but Christian Brathwaite was between him and Sean Tompkins for being the best overall recruit in this class.
Besides Novosad.
Oh, besides Novosad, yes.
Right.
And so Brathwaite was a massive loss. I think he's going to have a great career at LSU. So I'll be interested to see whether Pendergrass, switches over to playing inside linebacker. They took 2 last year with, oh my goodness, this hard on the. Doing radio is hard, guys. Jeremy Patton Evans last year, as well as the kid from West Orange Stark. But anyway, they took 2 last year is what I'm trying to say.
Carmelo Jones.
And sort of Kyler Jordan.
Yeah, and Kyler's playing Jack, but he could play inside. Right. So anyway, I as far as numbers go, I don't think there's a specific absolutely need, A, because it's the portal era, and B, because I think the roster is actually pretty evenly out at this point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I actually think this class pretty much hit every position of need, especially because they really need more veteran guys, which you're going to get through the portal.
Right.
So I had to save some room there. I know, one guy I want to focus in on, because I have him as a high 3-star. I think it's a pretty fair ranking for him. I know you have him in your top 5. He's just outside the top 5 for me, and that's Trey Wilson. Yeah. Defensive lineman, Lakeview Centennial, been committed for a while. Kind of one of the leaders in this class, actually, surprisingly. I know a lot of people think that was Austin Novosad, but Really wasn't. It was a lot of Torian York and a lot of Trey Wilson. But I know you're very high on Trey. Can you kind of explain why you like him so much? And he is an early enrollee, by the way.
Yeah. So it actually gets to one quick addendum on what we were just talking about, and this will bleed into Trey here. I do think a couple of position groups where Baylor absolutely needed to add guys who were instant impacts now, even without transfer portal stuff, was defensive back and defensive line. So I love the defensive back class that Baylor signed. And with this defensive lineman class, I think there are two guys who are really primed to play early. One of them is DK Kalu, and the other one is Trey Wilson. Trey is a guy that when Baylor first offered him, I was kind of iffy on, mostly because I just wasn't sure what position he was going to play. He is this kind of really interesting athlete in that he's about 6'2", already looks like he's about 250 pounds, but is an edge player. Like, he really is kind of like William Bradley King a couple years ago, where like he is a very clear, like, has that mindset of I'm going to beat you off the edge, plays with really violent hands. And so, but he doesn't look like he's the most fluid athlete. So I was like, is he going to be able to drop into coverage and do all that kind of jack stuff that Baylor needs him to do? But I was kind of questionable, and then I had somebody send me a picture of him from camp. And this is where recruiting can get awkward because you're like analyzing 17-year-olds' bodies. But that dude has the thighs of somebody who's going to be 290 pounds in no time. So, and so then that kind of becomes, okay, he's got these really violent hands. He plays with a great motor and a great edge. And you're looking at that, long arms, and you're looking at somebody who's going to be doing that from inside. That's where you get like these really fun interior defensive linemen who are just making plays in the backfield all the time. And so he's a guy where, because he has that positional versatility, I think he's going to get on the field. I doubt he redshirts this year, just because I think he's a guy where even if they want to redshirt him, he's just going to be making too many plays in practice. So I think his floor is really high. His upside isn't extremely high, but I do think he definitely has all conference potential. And because he's such a great kid, and like I said, I think he already is like 255 pounds or so, and he's going to get up there in no time. He'll be ready to play.
Yeah. Go ahead, Grayson. You got more?
Yeah. So I agree. Those were the two guys that come to mind too for me on the defensive line. Flipping over a little bit to the offense. Actually, let's stick with the defense line. I do want to get your thoughts on Jarrell Boykins. We talked about him a little bit earlier this week, but the Hutchinson Community College JUCO nose tackle, basically prospect, could also play defensive tackle, I suppose. But what do you see from him on film? Had a decent offer list as well. They beat out Nebraska, Arizona State, Washington State. But what do you think he brings to the table at 322 pounds?
Well, I mean, I love, it'll be interesting to see how Baylor handles JUCO prospects over the coming years, because with NIL, and I hate even calling it NIL, with money now involved, and, who knows how all of that's going to become as far as the transfer portal comes. So maybe JUCO prospects kind of become a new market and efficiency that Baylor can mine there. But I love interior defensive linemen for JUCO kids. It's kind of the same deal with interior offensive linemen on the other side of the ball too. A lot of times these are kids who were maybe about 30 pounds too light in high school. Maybe they were a couple inches too short. It wasn't easy to dream on how they would fill out their frame. And so, high-level colleges just weren't willing to take that bet. Why would you make that bet when you can just take somebody who's already there? Yeah. And so for him, he was a guy who he's gained about 40 or 50 pounds in a couple years. And now he's fully filled out in his frame, and all that athleticism that was being used as a defensive end in high school, he's now using that as a nose tackle. So I think is he the best player in this class? No, but when it comes to meeting a need with somebody who's going to, I think, as long as he's a good kid, tries hard in practice, all of those kind of things, like his path to starting is wide open. And Baylor needed somebody like him. He's not an Apu Ika, but Baylor's not going to probably ever find another Apu Ika in the portal again. That was kind of a one-off thing. Apu's a freak, but he very much is like a, top, at least league average defensive nose tackle, which being able to just sign somebody like that to come play in immediately is awesome.
Micah Gifford now official as well. Another signee coming in for Baylor. So Micah Gifford off the board, and I think that leaves them with less than a handful now at this point. But the one wide receiver signee out of Pflugerville-Weiss, we've already talked about him a couple of different times. When I saw him there towards the tail end of midway season, he was a good player. He was definitely a good player to check out. I will ask you one, and then let Grayson kind of round it out here. But Bryson Washington in the running back room, where does he fit in? Pretty much right away.
He fits into carrying the rock for Baylor in 2023.
Next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Richard Reese was a guy I had primed to play a lot this year, and we saw that. And I think Bryson actually reminds me a lot of Richard, except for he's a couple inches bigger, a couple inches taller, probably about 20 or 30 pounds heavier. But they both have that when you watch them play, it's just very clear that they understand how to play running back. That's a statement that maybe doesn't, isn't super descriptive, but just, you see the ball go in their hands. They have a natural feel for how to set up blocks. Bryson is a guy, when you watch his tape, that so many times you'll see him like 7 yards downfield waiting for the block to open up at the right angle, and then he hits it correctly. Whereas so many other running backs, and even good running backs in college, they're just getting by on pure athleticism and just kind of running in a straight line, being told wherever they want to go. So Bryson, I think, is this guy that understands how to play the position. I mean, physically, the dude is ready to roll. I don't know if you have current measurements on him, Grayson, but I would imagine he's 5'11", 215, somewhere in that range. Just looks absolutely ready. So we'll be interesting to see what happens with Baylor's running back room this year. I expect some attrition. I think we might see 2 or 3 guys that could come back, not come back. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that could go. But one of the ways that it is going to go is that if Bryson Washington stays healthy, I think he's easily going to get 5 to 10 carries a game. He's just that talented, that good of a running back. Grayson, I think you've said it best. He might not be the top running back in the state, but for this offense, he's the best running back in the state.
Exactly, and that's something that he can bring to the table pretty immediately. Baylor's also looking in the portal at the running back position as well, and I think that kind of speaks to your point of there could be more attrition to come in that room that maybe we don't know everything about. But I think it's pretty, in general, Richard Reese, Bryson Washington, if they had a transfer, and then maybe whether it's Squirrel or Quaylen if they stay. I think that's pretty much going to be the room unless Tay McWilliams comes back, 100% healthy, which is a massive question mark at this point. I guess last question for you. I kind of just general thoughts on kind of when you look at this class and you look at kind of, the talent level. How do you think it compares to the talent level of the other schools in the Big 12, and kind of where do you see Baylor in the pecking order as far as what they were able to do with this class in the high school ranks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the top of this class, I think the top 8, 9, 10 guys that Baylor signed in this class is about as good as we've seen in any Baylor class before. I'm not sure that the depth necessarily is there as far as other classes, but when you really list off the top 5 to 10 guys in this class, it's really up there. As far as directly comparing to other Big 12 schools, that's not something I feel comfortable opining on. It's enough work for me to do it for Baylor as well. That's probably something more about. But I think what Baylor did a really good job of in this class is, I feel like this is just such a good, every single one of their, especially the top guys, you see exactly how they're going to fit into the scheme. It seems like they have a very clear picture of what they want guys to be recruited for and how they're going to fit in. Bryson Washington, perfect wide zone running back. Sean Tompkins, he could be a guard in other schemes, but he's going to be a perfect right tackle in this scheme. Matthew Klopfenstein, so many college teams don't use tight ends properly. We know exactly how he's going to be used in this offense. So I really like the fit aspect that we're seeing across the board here. Last thing I just wanted to bring up, just because I know it's such a common question that we're going to get 78 times before fall ball, is just which guys do you see contributing early as a freshman? I know we talked about a few of them. Trey Wilson is somebody I talked about. DK Kalu is somebody I think this is kind of on the fence, but wouldn't surprise me to see him not get redshirted. We talked about Bryson Washington. Anybody else you got your eyes on, Grayson?
Well, Boykins is for sure playing.
Right.
He's for sure going to play this year. I think, looking at the roster, I think Matthew Klopfenstein is going to play this year for sure, just because you got Dabney, you got Kelsey Johnson. I think he's I think he's third best tight end on the roster when the moment he steps on campus. We mentioned Trey Wilson, mentioned Bryson Washington. I think maybe a little bit lower down on the list because it's going to be hard for offensive linemen to play right away. Sean Tompkins is the closest, I think, to being able to play right away.
There's like a 10% chance he comes in and it's just like instantly the best.
He's just way better than everyone else. Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I think the last one that I think I could envision a scenario where, hey, this guy finds a way on the field, whether it's a fit at a different position than he's being recruited for, or he's just simply the best cornerback on the roster, one of the best cornerbacks, is LeVar Thornton. Special prospect. Frame reminds me of JT Woods. Hips remind me of a cornerback.
Better than JT.
Right. And so that's kind of where you have this conundrum of where does he end up playing, because they need someone like him at field safety, or they need someone like him really just in general at the safety position with his
playmaker.
Speed. Right. But then you watch his film at cornerback and you're like, how can you possibly move him?
Those hips don't lie.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think that's probably as deep as I would go as far as guys who could play immediately.
Yeah, I just know that that is a question. Again, we're going to get it 1,000 times. So I think that those kind of 5 or 6 guys are the ones I'd watch. And sometimes when guys play early, you're like, oh man, that's a really bad sign of who's in front of them. You really would have liked some of the veterans to step up. But I do think those kind of, if Bryson Washington's playing early, that doesn't mean Richard Reese is bad. It just means that Bryson's really good. So I think there's and I would say the same for a couple other guys like Matthew Klopfenstein. He's going to play. Drake Dabney is really good. Kelsey Johnson's really good, but Matthew Klopfenstein is just ready to contribue. So sometimes, again, like I remember in Rules first year 2017, it was like, wow, we've got all these true freshmen playing. Nope, yikes. I wish that wasn't the case. Yeah. But there are, the way you want it every year is 3, 4, 5 guys who can come in and contribute. But once you get beyond that, you're like, wait, why are so many true freshmen playing? So I think hopefully Baylor's in the right spot here.
Yeah, I mean, that first year of the rule, Jerry McVay was out there starting safety in game 1 as a redshirt freshman.
Blake Lynch was playing corner.
Yeah, Blake Lynch, it was just a mess. Yeah, it was a mess. Well, for what it's worth, somebody asked about talking about the Big 12 where they fit, and they fit right in the middle right now. I mean, if you go off like 24/7 composite team rankings and all of that, Texas pretty wide margin as far as the number 1 team goes in the Big 12. Oklahoma with 24 commits. TCU with 23 at number 3. They've got 10 4-stars. I mean, TCU really loading up and taking advantage of the year that they've had. Texas Tech and then Baylor. They're at number 5, followed by K-State, West Virginia, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas. And obviously, like Kansas has got 12 commits. And the more you have, the higher your ranking. So you got to really kind of get into the details of it. But Baylor at 21 could definitely.
OSU being down there at 9. It is just really wild what's happening.
Heavy transfer portal, man.
I know it.
Heavy in the transfer portal.
Yeah, they know they have to. They've lost so much. So, I mean, that's about right for Baylor. I think their class is better than Tech's. Tech just has more guys in their class, so that's kind of where it figures in. And when you lose your quarterback, obviously, a guy ranked that high, that really sets you back a little bit. I'd probably have them 4th currently, just based on talent and kind of fit. It's probably right around that, right there with TCU, who's had a very nice finish to their class.
Yep. So this will change. There's another signing day, folks, to go. There's another one here in just a couple of months. So we're not done, and there's in between. I mean, really. We've had fun with this signing day. Everybody that Baylor expected to sign outside of, Austin Novosad has signed or is expected to sign. And there will be a couple more through the rest of the day. Even one of the transfers now, Campbell Barrington's officially signed. So Keytron Jackson, you would think, would be coming down the pipeline at some point, but that was a big transfer addition yesterday. So, I mean, here's basically the lay of the land. There's going to be a little bit more of the finishing off of this class today. And then tomorrow night, their bowl game. And then after that, a whole bunch of storylines from coaching hires to, still more potential staff changes. I mean, once the bowl season wraps up and signing day wraps up, like there will be coaches that leave their spot they're at today tomorrow. Yep. Like there will be guys that are like, oh, by the way, I'm going to Washington State now. So that's still to come. Coaching hires, more guys deciding whether or not they're going to be on the roster next year, head to the portal.
Baylor's going to have to lose 5, 6, 7, 8 guys from this roster just to get the guys that we've talked about today with the transfers and the recruiting class. So there's going to be so much movement. Beyond 365, we're going to be talking about it, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of posters talking about it as well. It's just going to be crazy.
Going to have Apu Ika probably declaring for the NFL at some point here soon. Obviously, we mentioned a little bit earlier, not playing tomorrow night. Neither is Mark Milton, but those are the only two. Although the Ika one in particular is a big one against a team like Air Force. I mean, that's the one guy I think you would want to have against Air Force tomorrow is Apu Ika.
And Baylor's defensive backs have struggled to tackle, and so we're going to see they're going to have to tackle all. There's a lot going on in that game. But,
there's a lot going on in that game. That is not just a mark as a W by any means. So there's that, and then I think everybody can kind of take a deep breath after tomorrow night's result, and then just go from there with all of the to-do list, but there is an awfully massive to-do list, so
I just have plenty. One real quick note I got here, which was I just wanted to give DJ Coleman a shout-out, signee in this class, because I heard from a high school coach in the DFW area who we'll talk about Baylor stuff sometimes, and he's a guy who will shoot it straight as far as his honest opinions about players, being like, I don't think this guy's a good one, and anyway, but he told me, Coleman, he said, great culture fit. He's going to be a great star. I think he's going to fit like a glove there, and the kid is a ball player. So I just thought that was cool. Shout out for him, and another good defensive back in this class. I think he's ready to play.
Yeah, best special teams player in the class on film. Yeah. At least blocks a lot of kicks. Just dirty work. All the dirty work is great, and so hopefully he can develop into a great star. He definitely fits the mold athletically, and I think he could be a great player. So that's great to hear that from a coach as well. And there it is, Keytron Jackson.
Officially
signed with Baylor. Great get for this Baylor.
But he only had like
class.
26 catches, Grayson.
I know, right? I know. And it's sad that this headline's going to get buried, but this is
stud.
Massive signing.
So both of their transfer commitments from this week are now officially signed. So that would give them there's somewhere in the ballpark of like 20 new names now official, and there's less than a handful of players still to make it official today. Grayson, I wasn't even keeping track of who all's left at this point, but I guess it's like LeVar Thornton, or did we talk about him? Okay,
Trey Wilson is one. Trey Wilson,
and he's like later today though.
Trent Thomas,
Caden Jenkins.
No,
he already signed.
Okay,
Palmer signed. Boykins. Corey Kelly. Those are the three, I think.
Okay, so 3 of the 20 are remaining, but then the 2 transfers. So they've 19 new faces, all officially Baylor Bears today, and then 3 more to go, and they'll have wrapped it all up. So, the morning started off a little bit of disappointment, obviously, at the quarterback spot, but I think that, for the 15 or 20 minutes we spent on that, we've spent another 2+ hours on the rest of this class, as it should be, and congratulations to all those young men, their families, their coaches, their schools, everybody involved. It's a long process, man, and it's a wild one as well, but I think all things considered, despite the one blemish, a pretty good day and good week for Baylor football and Dave Aranda and company. They can make it way better by winning the game tomorrow night and then going from there. But, fellas, any final thoughts before we head on out?
I don't think so. We wrapped this up. Did it for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I think we hit every single note we could possibly hit.
Yeah. I think we're figuring out why some college coaches want to coach in the NFL so bad. Because, man,
absolutely.
it is never ending. Never ending.
No, it's crazy. And I was just talking, earlier about, Dave Aranda, the Mike Leach funeral was yesterday, and you've got that going on, and just personally, but then you've got, this quarterback flip. You've got to go take visits. You've got to get guys committed. You got to prepare for a freaking bowl game. You got to hire a defensive coordinator. You got to hire
the defensive coordinator.
Yeah,
right now.
you're the DC, and you got to hire. So there's a lot on his plate, a lot on everybody's plate, but. They're eating good today as far as this recruiting class goes, and they'll go find a quarterback, and we'll have all the intel on that, and they'll find some more guys as well. We'll have all the intel on that and plenty of coverage of tomorrow night's Armed Forces Bowl, but we're going to get on out of here. We still have 365 Sports to come later this afternoon at 3 o'clock, myself and Paul Catalina, so stay tuned for that or come back for that later on, but big thank you to Jacob Wilson behind the scenes. Great job producing, getting those highlight clips up and all the graphics and everything else. Thanks, Travis, for coming in here and help us finish out this last hour and giving us your insight. And Grayson, thanks to all your hard work as well.
Absolutely.
And do appreciate you and appreciate everybody out there listening, everybody on the boards, and still much, much more to come, but pretty good day. And we'll see how the rest of it closes out. Until next time, till 3 o'clock in 365 Sports. We'll talk to you then. This has been the National Signing Day special on SicEm365.com and 365 Sports.